School Board workshop for Tuesday, November 26th. It is 5:32 p.m., so we'll get started with the first item on our agenda, which is a cybersecurity, I believe, update.
Yes.
So thank you for being here with us.
Absolutely. Thank you. Chair Andreessen and members of the board, thank you so much. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about our, it's a department update, but really focused in our information security, cybersecurity posture in the district. Bring everyone up to speed on current work there, kind of where we find ourselves in the landscape of this work, as well as a little bit of a look ahead into an infrastructure project that we have coming up, as though related to cybersecurity, but not directly or wholly in cybersecurity, and that's our network infrastructure project that will be coming up this next summer. We'll have RFPs coming out shortly, but I'll talk a little bit more about that here as we go into things. So, getting started, really, what we hope to do tonight, kind of our objectives, is learning about our current K-12 cybersecurity landscape, exploring kind of the current state of our work here at Hopkins relating to cybersecurity, and understanding our upcoming infrastructure project, how that relates to cybersecurity, how that supports our operations here in the district. And I, at the end, certainly look forward to any questions or any conversation that you might have. While I certainly hope to be as open as possible, I also know as we're talking about cybersecurity, there are some things that I will not be able to go into specifics about, and some of our practices and operations, our methods and sources that we work with. So with that, let's go ahead and begin. The key definition that I'll start with here tonight is really between privacy and security, in this sense, information security or cybersecurity. So privacy, in short, really is the right to be free from interference or intrusion and the ability to be left alone without being watched. So information privacy refers to the right to have control over your personal information and data that's been collected, stored, or used in any way. Privacy policies are in place to protect sensitive information and to safeguard that identity. Privacy is often about using sensitive information responsibly. Organizations are required to be transparent about what forms of data we intend to collect, what the purpose of that data collection is, and where and to whom that data will be shared. Then looking at the security side of that, security is really involves what are the measures taken to then protect that private information. So how are we protecting the privacy of individuals? Really being protected from any sort of danger, threat, or harm. Often refers to safety, in the digital world. This is often thought about as, data being breached or somehow leaked out into the public and not keeping that private information private. So a quick look just at the K-12 cybersecurity landscape, just so you have an understanding of kind of the bigger picture of what some of these pieces are that we're looking at. First of all, really start kind of ground some of the conversation here is K-12 is considered a critical infrastructure sector by the federal government. This was really defined in 2013 by presidential signing directive from President Obama, was additionally updated later on. But really starting that conversation is understanding K-12 has been designated as that critical infrastructure sector. And with that comes kind of some good pieces as far as having resources available, both at that state and federal level, but also some of the responsibility pieces around the complex regulatory and compliance environment that you can end up in by being named a critical infrastructure sector. Congress in 2018 signed or brought forward the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Act, which formed the agency of CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. I'll be mentioning that quite a bit tonight as we work fairly closely with CISA, get a lot of information from CISA, and as they get information from lots of other federal bureaus, both the FBI within the nation as well as some of the Directorate of Intelligence as well. One piece I'll talk about next is kind of the financials around cybersecurity. This is one thing that has changed considerably in the last decade or decade and a half. Is these are professional criminals that we're working with now from a cybersecurity standpoint. You know, this is no longer kind of the maybe the colloquial definition of thinking of you know, this is a teenager or 20-something in their parents' basement that's hacking on a, you know, on a computer or something like that. These are professional crime, cybercrime organizations, you know, that go so far as much as they have their own HR departments, they have their own finance departments, they have their own negotiators that work for them. So when they do, for example, encrypt or, you know, block access to some service, it's a professional organization that you're working with most of the time. These professional organizations are sometimes backed by a state. We call it a state actor, meaning being supported by some government, or at least are allowed to do their business without interference of that government wherever they happen to be operating in. So whether that be an active or a passive allowance, that's really where we find ourselves today. When you look at these numbers on here, you know, $1 billion a year in cybercrime as a service. So thinking about that, this is not necessarily just people who are trying to get into computers. This is actually an as a service. There are people who build a way to get into an organization and then they sell that to another organization to try to compromise them. It's a very, you know, many of them think of themselves as legitimate businesses that are operating in this space. When we look at the top security concerns in K-12, so this is from CISA and their annual survey that they do, of which Hopkins has participated in for the last 4 years. The top cybersecurity concerns with K-12 organizations.
Excuse me, did you say what CISA is? And I
Yeah,
missed
so
it?
CISA, as I refer to, is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency.
Okay.
It's a federal organization, part of Department of Homeland Security.
Sorry.
Oh, please, no reason to apologize. When we look at this survey, you know, our top concerns, and you might not be surprised by this, is funding really is far and above the top concern around this. Looking at a K-12 organization versus what I just talked about as these state level or state government funded crime organizations that are trying to access this private data, and thinking about what those concerns are. You know, certainly lack of funding, the increasing sophistication of these threats is going up just astronomically. It feels like we're on basically like a log curve on this of the what those increasing sophistication looks like. I'll also mention just the last point as well there of really an inadequate availability of cybersecurity professionals, folks to do this work, especially in K-12. It's been, for the couple organizations locally that have tried to hire cybersecurity professionals, mostly they've not been able to fill those positions at the salary that they're able to offer, because it is a wide open market where these professionals are pretty much able to name their price right now. The few times that these positions have gotten filled locally, the folks have only stayed for maybe a year or two and then have moved on to a different type of organization. So also, you know, a highlight here is certainly being a education organization, thinking about how are we preparing students for that, knowing that there is such a need in this area. A report came out earlier this year that said currently, just in the United States alone, there's 750,000 unfilled cybersecurity positions. They estimated globally it's 3.5 million open positions for cybersecurity professionals. And that's just within the next year is what that expectation is. Just another organization to look at what some of those top concerns are. So COSN, the Consortium of School Networks, that's the national organization of tech directors in K-12 and upper ed, released their annual survey as well, which Hopkins also participated in this past year. And of the top 5 issues brought forward, generally, cybersecurity was number 1, data privacy and security number 2, and then crisis preparedness within IT departments being the 5th item within that top 5. Looking at some of the trends in K-12, this is across the country, and what sort of issues are being experienced by K-12 organizations across the country. Number 1 and number 2 are really fairly related to each other in being malware. So this is software that's usually posing as a legitimate software. Kind of the number 1 out there is software that's posing to be like Adobe Photoshop. And you can download it from a risky website, what we'd call it. Basically, usually it's a cheap or free version of Photoshop type of software. Certainly wider than that, but that's probably the number 1 example out there. And that software certainly has all sorts of stuff hidden in it that is compromising your computer and doing that. So you hear sometimes in the media talking about the supply chain pieces and really making sure that that supply chain is in order. And for us, that's making sure that we're always getting software from reputable sources right from the manufacturer itself, and making sure that it doesn't have some unintended software that's riding along for the ride there. The next few things are also fairly related. The next 2 or 3 items are, command and control software, and then phishing software. Those usually kind of go together, where you get a phishing email to say, download this thing because we need, something's wrong with your computer. Please download this to fix it. And that usually is a software that's actually making your computer be available for others to use. So that's kind of round that out, what that looks like. The next one I'll talk about is across the United States, just in the last few years. So this is since 2016. There's been 1,619 public incidents named around the country. This comes from the organization K-12-6, which is a cybersecurity organization that really works almost exclusively with schools. Most folks figure that this number is probably somewhere in the 4 to 10-fold underreported. We believe that there probably can almost add a 0 to that as far as how many have actually happened. A couple Minnesota incidents that have been of note over the last couple of years, Elk River schools, Minneapolis schools, Rochester, Cloquet. The Arrowhead Regional Computing Consortium still has pending litigation in this. Some of the costs around that, they're estimating upwards of $1 million in their litigation costs at this point. Nationally, the average now that we're seeing for costs of a cybersecurity incident, the national average now is $3 to $4 million per incident. That includes, the costs that come through with, giving those free credit monitoring. Many of us have probably been on the receiving end of those from when a organization that our data does live with gets breached. You get free credit reporting for a year, or you have some of those types of remedies that are put in place, and those costs are included in that, seeing that $3 to $4 million.
Is that a national cost average for school districts, or
Yep,
just
that's a national cost average overall.
any organization?
Yep. Certainly, folks are taking notice of this. At a conference this past year, Jen Easterly, who is currently the director of CISA, made K-12 an area of focus and kind of coined the term that K-12 is a target-rich and resource-poor organization. Thinking about the amount of data that we hold and very personal information at times, and what resources usually K-12 organizations can bring to bear on this. Really calling out K-12 and healthcare as their two most at-risk verticals. So talking about all these risks, talking about what we're seeing in the area, what are some of the funding opportunities, what is some of the funding available for this? Dedicated funding for cybersecurity has been lean. Our network and internet connections have some reimbursement based on a sliding scale of our free and reduced lunch, which has become a challenge in the era of universal lunches in the state of Minnesota, as those numbers, the forms are going down. Currently, many of our federal reimbursements will only use those FRAM numbers of the forms we're getting back versus any of those community metrics that we've talked about at this table previously. The only security consideration allowed in that federal program is for firewalls. And even in those firewalls, it only covers the hardware, which, thinking about how do we keep up on this, the hardware aspect is frankly the smaller aspect of it. It's all of the people and software backing it that actually make it work. And as an example, in 2022, we replaced our firewall, and the E-rate eligibility of that, so the eligibility that we could even get some reimbursement on, was only 43% of that total expenditure. And then here at Hopkins, our percentage of reimbursement on top of that is 40%. So this base number is used to then calculate and what that looks like. Security involves measures taken to be protected from danger, threat, and harm. It often refers to safety. In the digital world, we can see what this looks like. So in the state side of pieces, we also have seen some money become available to this, both the federal and state. The federal just wrapped up applications for a program of which they had funded at $200 million. They received requests that exceeded $3.7 billion. So, we're well off into the decimal points here of how much need is actually being met. At the state level, in FY19, there was one-time legislation allocation for $25 million for both physical and cybersecurity requests. We exceeded that $25 million in the first day that applications were open in 2019. The total request within just the state of Minnesota was $255.5 million from school districts, with available funding of $25 million. So really, as far as how do we try to meet this need and what does that look like, we certainly have a ways to go with our federal and state partners participating. Certainly the insurance industry has taken note. Here you can find the insurance companies have taken note of what this risk looks like. As we know, insurance is really just a measure of risk, and how do we meet that? And we meet that with premiums. The insurance companies have taken note of what that looks like, and here you can see what our cybersecurity insurance premiums have done over the last 5 years. And again, this is just the cybersecurity premium. So we're this year over 4x what we were in FY21. So that's an idea around the background of that. So we just summarized really the current general threat landscape of cybersecurity. The main takeaways are that today's cyber criminal is a professional, and that nationally and internationally losses from cyber attacks have exploded. Federal and state governments have been slow to respond with funding and support for K-12 schools. Cost to schools to build out these security goals have had to be funded through standard budgeting processes. Insurance companies have seen this risk pool grow considerably. Next, we're going to talk about the current state and future work here we've done specifically at Hopkins around cybersecurity, and kind of describe what that work has looked like. So first, kind of setting out what is the model that we look at for security. We look at really a 7-layer security model with the perimeter traditionally having been thought of as that outside piece of that. You know, Hopkins certainly has been a part of this over the years as well. We look historically. We don't have to go back maybe too far. Back in September 2003, it was a Hopkins High School student that wrote a variant of the blaster worm that at that time was considered to be the most expensive computer virus ever written. So the amount of losses that it caused across the world was significant, and that individual ended up spending an 18-month prison term in response to that. So thinking about what that looks like, you certainly have a local connection to this historically, but also looking at the 7 layers, you know, from perimeter security down to your network, your endpoint, which is your laptop or tablet, your applications that you're using, you know, data security, and certainly the people. You know, all of that kind of then lands to the person. When we look at now moving forward, the current conversation is really that this paradigm is fundamentally flawed and outdated, whereas the paradigm that is emerging in cybersecurity is identity is at the center. So instead of that perimeter piece, it is now all about that identity. And to talk about what that looks like, this has really fundamentally started change in 2020. And we look at historically in the school, all of our devices, all of our people were here in our schools. We could defend the perimeter with a firewall to the internet connection. As long as we defended that perimeter well, we were relatively safe. You know, I think about that as kind of like a castle. You know, you had the castle walls. The only way to get into the castle was the drawbridge, and you had to get over the moat to get in. In 2020, that moat got filled and those walls got torn down. Our users are now everywhere on the internet. You know, they're working from home. We have, you know, students who are, you know, studying abroad, you know, supporting our Vision 2031 goal of our scholar trait of being globally minded and well-traveled. Our students are traveling while participating in classes. You know, we last year, you know, repaired an iPad for a scholar in Barcelona at the Apple Store. So we have students who are traveling, and so we no longer have that old paradigm of being able to defend a perimeter that our users are all working and learning inside of. With that, we certainly have had to completely rethink what that looks like. You know, that all of those people, all of those devices are anywhere on the internet. And so what does that look like going forward? Thinking about Hopkins specifically, our timeline and our work that we've done over the last several years, we were, as far as we can tell, the first school district in the state of Minnesota in 2015 to start work around cybersecurity. This really involved mostly around again, being a financial basis, really involved the payment card industry. So PCI, DSS, yet another acronym, because we certainly don't have enough of them in education alone. So PCI DSS is the payment card industry's data security standards. So they've set standards around what pieces you have to have in place to be able to protect your data. And really the impetus for this was working with our financial controller at the time in our business services department, looking at a significant change that the payment card industry made in that any fraudulent transactions, instead of the payment card folks like Visa, MasterCard, instead of them absorbing those costs, they changed the liability framework that everyone had to accept, and that liability fell to wherever the data was breached from. So if you were found to be the source that someone's credit card number got out there, you had liability, you held the liability of any charges against that going forward. So that really changed that paradigm, and from Hopkins' standpoint, we wanted to think, how do we, it's another risk that we need to figure out. How do we mitigate this risk? and PCI DSS is that way. In 2015, we started that work. In 2017, we had our first qualified opinion from an auditor around our PCI work, and it was a ton of work to do over those 2 years to get into that place. Really making sure that our network was right, really making sure that we were separating the types of data that were traversing our network so that that could happen. The big piece of this work came to both the IT department, but really working with community ed, school nutrition, athletics and activities, those departments that you think about that, yes, are receiving payments for some reason, whether it's a community ed class or whether it's additional balances for school lunch or a la carte items, activities and athletics for some of those fees as well. So over the next several years, our security posture really continued to evolve. We took significant steps to help make sure that we were moving in the right direction. Our IT staff required multi-factor authentication, so that's what you're probably familiar with. Well, almost all services nowadays, but you're familiar with, getting your 6-digit code from your bank when you try to log in and doing that type of a thing. Our IT staff have had that requirement in place since 2017. Then in 2021, we required all staff accounts to have multi-factor authentication. In 2022, we established a 24/7, 365 security operations center. So we have a contact ability 24/7, 365, because the requirement around the 365 is an important piece, because we are also finding, especially in K-12s, that the most likely time for us to be attacked is at winter break or spring break or the first couple weeks of school, when we have those really busy times and when IT staff are frankly busy. They're supporting our students and our staff through those operations, or it's at break when they're trying to take a break themselves. And then we look forward to 2025 here, which I'll be talking about certainly more toward the end of the presentation here, as we move towards the next paradigm of security called zero trust and conditional access. Want to call out a couple main partners that we work with. We work with Red Canary is our managed detection and response. So they are our 24/7, 365 security operations center. They take in all of the data that we have and help with doing that threat hunting. We've had a very good relationship with them. We've been with them now for 2 years, helping get to pull all of that data together for us and build those automations. Dark Knight Solutions is a cybersecurity consulting firm that does a lot of security information sharing, governance, strategic planning. Our consultant, Patrick Tatro, has a pretty unique history, having worked for being a leading cybersecurity analyst for both a Fortune 5 company here locally, as well as for a K-12 school district. So being able to bring that different flavors and different types of environments around what should that look like for a K-12 organization. CISA, I've talked about them already some, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. We get a lot of threat intelligence from them, is what is referred to as really the information from them of a, hey, piece of software that we know you have has a vulnerability that allows folks access to the computers. How high of a risk is this to your organization? What does this look like? We get a constant stream of information from them. And CISA is getting that from their federal partners, as I mentioned, the FBI, the NSA, and some of the other signals intelligence organizations at the federal government level. They're able to distill that down and get that to usable information to get to K-12 organizations. And that's through their multi-state in sharing and analysis center. So really, recently also the state has tried to become more involved in this. Much of that is coming through a statute change, is starting this weekend essentially. So December 1st, a new statute goes into place with a mandatory reporting requirement for all K-12 organizations now, that we have to report any compromised account, any compromised data, anything within 72 hours, which is a pretty tight timeline. Some of this is in response to, I guess I would say, a pushback with what some of our insurance processes have been. Historically, an insurance company will, if there's a loss, an insurance company will come in and require non-disclosure agreements and non-disclosure of data, which can really be a risk for others, because if one organization gets compromised by something, most likely a neighbor has the same type of software running. And so, historically, there's been no sharing of data. I can say, with a couple of the very large breaches nearby in organizations, there was no sharing of data, and at some point, straight up refusal of acknowledgement of even what was going on, which from a cybersecurity posture is the opposite of where you need to be there. So the state is trying to become more involved in that, and also the legislature pushing that through statute of now having these mandatory reporting requirements. Certainly every time you have a mandatory reporting piece, it can be a double-edged sword there of how fast can we move and actually report and acknowledge and understand what's going on that quickly, but also knowing that that helps our neighbors as well. We've really taken a consortium approach. With Dark Knight Solutions, we've been working as part of a six-member, six-school district consortium of really bringing ourselves together, active participation around what's going on, sharing the costs, helping to build some of our incident management plans, so that we can work together and do this once and adopt them across our organizations. We meet monthly to review our strategies, discuss the challenges, things that we're running into, and to support one another in enhancing our collective cybersecurity efforts. We established this, like I mentioned, with Dark Knight 8 years ago, and have this really proven invaluable in fostering this collaboration with these member school districts. Hopkins Information Services, really proudly supports all 4 major computing platforms. That's Mac OS, iPad OS, Windows, and Chrome OS, utilizing all of these devices throughout all of our schools. We've got approximately 11,000 devices across all of our schools. I'll mention that in my tenure here at Hopkins, we've gone from approximately 3,500 devices across the entire school district to now 11,000 devices across the school district, and the staffing in the department has increased by 3. So thinking about what some of those scaling pieces do look like, having reduced a couple of those positions just in the last budget year, certainly again back to that idea around we have these budget challenges that are real, and thinking about how do we provide all of these services as that budget challenge continues to grow. So then while Hopkins utilizes the Google Suite for many of our collaboration applications, all authentication here is handled through Microsoft. We utilize ClassLink as our single sign-on. Again, trying to at least build the framework here to help you understand what those pieces look like. So all of our devices in Hopkins, really the number one defense that we have is keeping them current. Both from a software as well as a hardware standpoint. All of our hardware, all of our computers, the ones that you're utilizing this evening, are on a 4-year replacement cycle, and that is both to contain our total cost of ownership on those devices. As the older a device becomes, the more expensive it gets for us to upkeep, because you end up having more visits, more need for IT services as that device gets older. So keeping that 4 years is about that sweet spot for the cost of replacing that device and then the cost of supporting that device. So really trying to keep those in place. As devices age, they just become more expensive to maintain. Our technicians are currently finishing up the replacement of all of our 2024 batch of devices. So all of our devices are, on that 4-year cycle. So about a quarter of our devices getting replaced every year. Sometimes they do need to follow up and follow up and follow up again with staff to make sure that those happen, but we're really hoping to complete that here in the next week of getting all of those devices placed, because it's critical work. It's considered critical infrastructure work on our side. Sometimes staff don't want to move devices because, essential processes. Sometimes there's a piece of software, they finally got it set up the way they want it to be, and sometimes that can be hard to move over to a new device. But really, it's necessary because just last week, there was a vulnerability that was released that only affected older computers. There wasn't a software fix to it, but it was, a specific generation of processor that was vulnerable. And so that's why we are always trying to stay current on that, because those sorts of things certainly do happen. For our software side of the house, we require a 30-day update cycle. So anytime a new piece of software is released, we require that software to be up to date within 30 days following its release. Same is said for our operating systems. I'm sure everyone here also at the table has seen our emails over the last month here of saying, hey, please get upgraded to the current version of everything. And we're just about there. The deadline for that, by the way, is tomorrow night, if you haven't updated yet. Next step here is some of those key security toolings. I won't go into these too much just because it kind of is a rabbit hole to jump down into some of the specifics here. But really, this is where we get a lot of our security data from. So I mentioned all of our authentication, and really with identity being at the center, that all comes through the Microsoft Defender stack of information, whether that be cloud services or whether that be on the Windows device. We also utilize Jamf Protect across our Apple fleet and getting that information along with Fortinet at our perimeter. So given our extensive use of Microsoft as our fundamental infrastructure, we've upgraded to advanced Microsoft licensing to leverage their enhanced security tools in that area. We also utilize that, as I mentioned, the Fortinet firewall, and then our Apple fleet using the Jamf Protect EDR. Furthermore, we do conduct routine security scans, both from outside our network as well as within our network. We have our internal annual one coming up here shortly, which is really an industry standard tool for cybersecurity monitoring in organizations. These tools collectively contribute to our commitment to maintaining our secure environment. These next few graphics, I'm going to just kind of walk through what does it look like, the amount of information we get, how do we actually walk that down to the point of understanding when there's a risk in our environment that we need to immediately address. This information comes from our partner, Red Canary. Ooh. The next couple charts really are going to tell that story of how we get through all of this data and how that becomes something that we need to act on. This does not account for kind of the general threats our staff deal with on an almost daily basis, like phishing emails is just kind of the easiest example. For example, we do see a surge of noise happen in kind of our cybersecurity posture, often coinciding with threats now we receive in the physical world. This is why we talk about cybersecurity in part of our holistic school safety model as well, as one of the number one things we're seeing now in our environment is whenever there's some sort of a physical threat, we're seeing reflections of that also in our cybersecurity threat. Whether that be some sort of a public proclamation of something, that's going to happen, or a public, standing of, something around the school district. We're seeing physical, threats of physical harm following threats of cybersecurity harm, or in reverse. If we're seeing threats of physical threats to a school, we're seeing cybersecurity related events to that as well. In the last couple years, we've had 3 incidents now where we've had to have a real-time running call with our cybersecurity experts seeing what those threats are doing. The most common way that that happens right now is also increasing the amount of noise around that and what that happens. So a couple things that look at it. So starting out here real quick, looking at the 3 billion plus records of information that come in, and we start to run that through a whole bunch of filters coming down to what those threats look like they're being identified. So 3 billion telemetry records, most of that coming through our Microsoft and Jamf stack. Those key takeaways is over 17 terabytes of telemetry so far just this year. So that's somewhere, somewhere in the ballpark of 70 times the amount of data that's on your laptop right now. Note that, about 82% of our environment is Apple. And so also with that, Chromebooks and iPads currently, the industry considers them to, industry accepted that those platforms do not require specific agents running on them to collect data from that. Take all of that data, continue to kind of distill it down. We're trying to refine and continue to refine what that data looks like. Those 3 billion telemetry records then come in and be analyzed both automatically through digital methods as well as professional threat hunters using analytics to boil that down to 17,547 suspicious matches in the past so far this year. Then that continues to move further down to 496 analyzed events. And probably the most difficult part of cybersecurity is even after you can see we've already kind of distilled these threats down 3 levels, approximately 79% of those are false positives. So the amount of time that you're spending really going down a rabbit hole on something can be quite a bit at times. And that's where we really utilize Red Canary's expertise to help understand what that looks like. One of the most significant workloads in security work is that sheer amount of information and how to distill it into actionable information. A common technique around these real world threats that we're seeing now is a strategy known as flooding the zone. This technique originated on the military side of the world and having so many troops and equipment and movement that it masks the actual motive of operation that's coming. So confusing or causing a defender to fail to act. In modern times, this is now utilized both in media as well as in cybersecurity. That's where we see these in misinformation and disinformation campaigns. It's no longer necessarily about trying to get a specific outcome. It's about creating as much chaos and confusion as possible to cause you to not act when you should. The idea is really just to create that noise around what your true intentions actually are. So in this case, that false positives are filtered out and 28 confirmed threats came to the Hopkins team for our infrastructure team to look at. Of those 28 threats, 1 was a high severity threat, 21 were medium, and then 6 lower end threats. So these 22 incidents were immediately responded to then by our staff, either automatically, given our playbooks in Red Canary, or by sometimes as simple as just a walk-up, someone from our technology team going to that person and finding out what's going on their computer and kind of going from there.
So John, with the new cyber reporting law, then would all of these have reached the threshold where we have to report, and who does the reporting?
Yeah, so with the new required reporting piece, we then would have to evaluate these and say, all right, of all of these, did a breach actually occur, or did an account actually get compromised? Even when we distill it down to this level, some of these still could be false alarms, or it could be just yes, there was a piece of malware installed, but no data was exfiltrated, no data was lost around that. So we just have to fix the issue essentially at that point. Now, if an account was compromised, that someone remotely gained access to an account, which is the case for our high severity event that we have here, then yes, that would require a mandatory report.
So then your team would send that report in, or does
Yep.
Red Canary
So
help
then
us
our
with that?
team would be the reporting authority, rests with me in that we would follow our incident management plan around a cybersecurity incident, and part of that plan will now contain that mandatory reporting of that incident. Yeah.
What happens if they compromise half of it, right? So they get the credential or the token, but they need the MFA. Does that count, or does that not count?
It is unclear in the statute of what that is going to be. We have, there's an open conversation about that right now. The current thinking is it's more around access of the account. So if they would have to defeat both the password as well as that multi-factor authentication. Yep, there's also not necessarily clarity around, is it any account? So even a student account that might not have access really to any larger data group, is that reported the same as a staff account that might have access to a lot of information? Right now, it's not clear, but the default that that's being recommended to us to move forward with is that it would be any compromised account, that they actually gain full access to the account.
It's a big surface.
Yeah.
Director Wetter, do we know what the state is doing with that data?
Yeah, so that data right now it's still being developed on everything they're going to do with that. The hope, and frankly, I've been lobbying pretty hard for around what this does look like, is that data would be turned over to the Minnesota Fusion Center, which is run by the Department of Public Safety, has traditionally been very much in a physical security role. That's the organization that we hear from, like earlier, I believe it was earlier this fall, when several schools across the state received swatting calls. That's the type of information that we get from the Fusion Center and through DPS. They are now taking on some of this digital role, the cybersecurity role. They're coming up to speed on that. I think we still have some work to do there. But the hope is that when a compromise happens and has occurred, that turns into that threat intelligence data that we can share then with other school districts and say, here's what happened, so that you can better defend against that happening in your environment.
So increasing that transparency and collaboration that you were talking about earlier.
Yes, yep. And there are some protections within that statute as well, that data does stay private, or there are not public record visibility pieces around that reporting structure as well, because of that sensitive nature, that by giving that data up can put others at risk. Training and professional development, people are our number one asset and our number one risk when it comes to cybersecurity. Someone that identifies a threat, as our staff are good at doing with phishing emails, lots of things that come in. We've just wrapped up our annual cybersecurity required training that everyone has to take at least once a year with, the showing proficiency in that area, and then those routine test phishing emails to help continue to let staff be aware of what's going on. Making sure that they know who they can go to and seek support when they need to. And that's also having technical staff available. When a staff receives a questionable email, they have someone they can go to. We have staff in every single one of our schools so that they can approach them even directly, if not reporting it automatically through our systems. Digital security response, with all of this work noted, Hopkins is known really as a leader in the K-12 space. around cybersecurity. This work is about building relationships beforehand, before an event happens, having those relationships in place, both locally with CISA, with the local FBI office, and of course with our partners in law enforcement. I personally have presented at regional, national, and international events around the work that we've done here at Hopkins and helping to kind of the raising that tide, to lift all ships and helping all of us to get better at that. Additionally, Hopkins has been invited to secure briefings to talk with our state and federal partners around what that looks like. How can we understand, and frankly, from our federal partners, helping them understand some of these unique challenges that K-12 faces. With the number of staff that we have in our IT department to help tackle these pieces, and working with our federal partners to help them understand that this isn't a huge staff that they're working with. While tonight's presentation is really focused on the technical procedures and resources, an important aspect is continued building of understanding of privacy for all of our learners. Really the AI revolution in our technology right now has quite a bit of upside to it, but also there is a concern being voiced by many around the threat to privacy that this has. With many of the AI driven pieces of software out there, their privacy policies are frankly horrible to abhorrent at some places. Of that, every question you ever ask an AI, every information it gives you, anything you volunteer up goes back into the model and is available to everyone. Couple corporate institutions have found out the hard way of even having unannounced products getting released on ChatGPT because somebody asked about it, and someone on their team used ChatGPT to help write a report, and you called out some of those pieces by name, and that goes back into the model and is now available generally on the internet. So our tech integration specialists have a key role in this, in reviewing every application that is being adopted in Hopkins, reviewing those privacy policies as well as against our equity rubric to make sure that the software fits in our environment and has a good standing for an educational need. Really leading the continuous staff engagements around application usage, engaging with staff, assisting with the digital access assignments for service, and ensuring the course sections, all of that data is where it needs to be, that it's easily available to folks and not available to people who should not have that available. Our digital literacy team leads our media and information literacy work with our scholars, sometimes thought of it digital literacy or digital citizenship classes, and they really have that collaborative learning sessions. They also engage in supporting student and staff learning in support of that. What is your digital footprint and understanding? Kind of the idea that everything you ever put on the internet is written in Sharpie. That there is a permanence to everything that you always put online. And so thinking about that, what is your digital footprint? What are you leaving out there, both for yourself or maybe a future employer is going to find online, or maybe someone is going to use information to take advantage of you because you've put information out there. All right, this past section, we've talked about our Hopkins security posture and our current work and what we've seen locally happen. The capital projects levy supports this work, but we're bursting at the seams right now. Security is a whole new domain of work that we have not yet directly staffed or directly funded, but we're going to need to be thinking about that soon. Hopkins has a robust policy framework in place to support this work, but we know that we're at this point now where we need to be thinking about what that future, those next steps look like. Up next, we'll discuss our upcoming infrastructure project that serves both the security role as well as that very visible day-to-day operations role of accessing the internet, as well as the wireless that we're using here tonight just to get online. We're currently about to release an RFP in support of this, replacing our current network and upgrading all of our current infrastructure. Quick timeline around what we're looking at here, just for the board to understand our current work that you're going to be seeing here very quickly. Back in March, we engaged consultant True North Consulting to work with us on developing our requirements for this RFP, learning about what kind of the current state of the art looks like from manufacturers, developing those specifications, writing the RFP, and the RFP will be out here in the next couple weeks. Following receiving responses to that, we'd be looking then toward a contract here in February. This is an approximate timeline to work, largely being driven by the federal E-rate timeline that I mentioned earlier on. Very specific dates we have to follow, which of course takes us right through the middle of the holiday season, which is really hard to figure dates out for. But this is a federally driven timeline that we have to work within. Once we get to that contract point, then March and June, we'd have work on around some of our internal systems, our identity and conditional access pieces, then physical installation of all of this equipment can start no sooner than July 1st. Again, that federal timeline that we have to work with. Then throughout the month of July, we'll be installing all those pieces and then doing integrated testing really the first week of August to be ready to go for our school startup this coming fall. Should there be any configuration changes that we need to look at after stress testing that new equipment for the first month or so of school, we'd be utilizing MEA week to come in and make any changes that we might need to do with that.
Director Wetter?
Yes.
I have a question. What budget bucket does this come out of? Is it operating? Is it capital?
Yep.
Referendum money?
Yeah, great question, thank you. The whole of all of the funding for all of this comes out of the capital projects levy. Yep, so both the equipment, the professionals needed to work with our staff to bring this in, as this is a project that we only do once every 7 years, as well as the consulting around that, as well as all the software involved in it, is all the capital projects levy. So really wholly contained within the CPL.
Thank you.
Looking at some of the goals of this pretty significant upgrade, we've done extensive site surveys, looking at Wi-Fi across all of our schools, finding out with both at least our 5 largest sites to ensure reliable coverage around that. Especially Wi-Fi is very challenging to do on multi-level buildings. So if you have a 2-story building or a 3-story building like we have here at Eisenhower, those are the most challenging environments for us to come into for Wi-Fi. So additionally to that of just thinking about Wi-Fi coverage is the density of devices. So think about maybe in your bag tonight or in your purse or whatever, how many devices do you actually have with you right now? 2 devices? 3 devices? Maybe even 4 devices? Thinking about all of those pieces that you have, our design basis for the first network that I worked on in 2008 was 2. Our device basis for the next network is going to be 5. So thinking about the capacity, and each of those devices, even if they are off and in your bag right now, they're trying to hit the Wi-Fi right now. They are actually creating load on the Wi-Fi network. So thinking about that in any of our schools, that's personal devices. Even if a student's cell phone is not on their person, but sitting in their locker, it still creates load on the Wi-Fi because it's a shared resource. Any phone just pinging saying, I'm here, is taking up time in the radio frequencies. So that's something that we have to design for, that we have to make sure that we're really supporting as we go forward. So our main goals as we look at this next network are remaining at current supported technology. This is required both with our insurance. This is also required by PCI DSS. You have to be in current supported hardware and software. With that, our wireless access system reaches its end of service life in July of 2025. So we're really doing it right when our current system is ending support. Our current wired network, all of that equipment goes to end of software support in December of 2025. So really, I guess the main point here is I think we're really trying to line this up of not jumping too fast, but we know that we have to upgrade our network to stay in support, both in support of security as well as in support of making sure our services stay available for students. We're trying to maintain that reliable access and make sure those pieces are there. Our updated Wi-Fi system, as I mentioned, is a changing landscape, and with that capacity. Our current system is certainly showing that we are right at the edge of capacity on it. For example, in this room, when we have our monthly large meeting here, and it's been talked about last, when we have HILT, our instructional leadership team meets in this room, we are bursting on it and have had issues where everyone can't go to a site and try to access data at the same time. So we know that we're reaching that capacity. Our wired network is meeting the end as well there as far as being able to update and support all the latest security processes. Supporting of kind of that security postures is really where we're headed to next. Previous networks, as I mentioned, in 2011, really upgraded all of our cabling. 2011 was the biggest project that I've ever been a part of here at Hopkins, where we upgraded all of our cabling in the district to meet current standards for data. When we first moved from analog to a internet protocol-based phone system, and it was really our first saturation coverage network, thinking that we could have an entire class online in every classroom at the same time. 2018 was really our first secure network in place, our secure access wireless network, saturation coverage in all spaces, this time to include our large spaces. So for example, in our auditoriums or our gymnasiums, being able to have everyone in those spaces also online was one of the main requirements in that 2018 build out. As well as covering Wi-Fi in kind of back of house areas. Thinking about, the HVAC systems, we don't move air in any of our schools without that network being available. And so when technicians are trying to adjust something and they're wanting to make a setting change and see if it actually is happening in that air handling unit, we need to make sure that we have that connectivity in back of house areas so that they can see that as well. In 2021, we did a network overlay of adding dedicated outdoor wireless so that classes even outside could utilize wireless when it made sense, both being in that outdoor space, but also still having that connectivity back to whatever lesson they're working on. The next item I'll talk about, and this is the security paradigm that we're coming to with this new system. I mentioned before kind of that perimeter-based network security, thinking that, and that's what we currently live in, is the idea is keeping people off of your operational network unless they have the information necessary to get onto it. But in Hopkins now, once you're on the network, you're on the network. The zero trust network security really changes that paradigm of where establishing that trust is continually monitored and multiple data points go into understanding that, not just do you have the password to get onto the network. So that's going to be kind of the fundamental change around our next network, is moving into that zero trust network. And that's really broken up as a signal. So what are you saying? What is your device saying? Does it belong to the organization? What are all of those data elements around that? Then the system automatically based upon that information, making a decision around what should you have access to, and then enforcement of that being in that continuous loop of that happening. So why conditional access and zero trust really is to empower users to have seamless access to data whenever and wherever they need it. They're again getting away from that perimeter paradigm that people need to access their information no matter where they are. And how do we get them access to that when they need it? It's no longer enough just to evaluate these items in isolation of identity, device, application, and infrastructure. It's evaluating all of them all the time continuously. So a device on your network can't be assumed to be a friendly device anymore. A single authentication like a password can easily be defeated. So it's looking at all of it holistically together. This next graph, as we have just a couple more to go here, is a pretty busy one, but really talks about that of this continuous update, what zero trust looks like, and making sure all of those pieces are coming together. So what does this look like more from a flow chart standpoint? For example, signals coming together, both the user, the identity information, as well as the device. So going forward, we plan to implement where for our top tier of services that hold very sensitive data, for example, our student information system, would only be accessible from a Hopkins managed device with a verified authentication for that user. So you would not be able to access that on a personal device or a home device where we can't authenticate that there's no virus installed on that device. There's not something on that computer that's logging every keystroke that you're entering as you're entering in, student information into that. So that's this next generation where we're looking at is all of those pieces would be required for that to then move into either allowing access by specific application, requiring that multi-factor authentication, or blocking access before they get to any of that data. So what's next in this infrastructure upgrade? RFP is going to be available here in early December. Responses are going to be due in January to be evaluated with the recommendation to move forward with one. End of January, early February, we're currently targeting the February 11th meeting. We would be looking for the board to approve that request. End of February, we'd then be looking at final contracts. March through June, as I highlighted earlier, we'll be working with that contractor for implementation. July 1st, it arrives on our doorstep, and we are off running with the actual hardware install, physically putting those pieces in place. On or around August 1st, that validation testing, and then coming back at MEA break for any service window resolution of any non-critical items that we need to look at. So I would ask for the board just to be aware that, the sizable contract that we are moving forward with, that would be coming for approval in February, following tonight, robust conversation here and, having a plan in place and learning from all of you. If there's any questions here, our plan at this point would be to have that on the consent calendar for approval at that February meeting. Current work, as I've mentioned with Director Zhao's question earlier, that work will all be funded through the CPL. That is in our budget planning process really for the last couple years, knowing that this work is coming. And we'll need to explore, what that looks like going forward. As I mentioned with the security requirements, over the next couple years, we're going to have to look at the CPL and how do we create either expanded or create space in there for all of these different extended functions that we're needing to be thinking about as our security landscape is changing. So to maintain a fair bidding environment, we can't go into specifics around what our expected costs are in that, but we do expect it to be in a couple $1 million ballpark price range on that. So This is, like I mentioned, already budgeted for in the CPL. Because the CPL is a 10-year timeline on that, we are able to spend forward and backward within that 10 years. So we've been purposefully slightly underspending in the CPL the last couple years, knowing that we're going to have this surge need in 25, 26 budget year for this project. So that's been, planned in as we're moving forward with our budgeting process. Really then, thank you, both Hopkins community for continuing to support this work through the capital projects levy. Then our information services staff, we've got dedicated professionals who are working all the time and making sure that we're supporting these technical systems, which really support learning throughout our entire environment, whether here physically in school, in our schools, or anywhere in the world as they're learning through traveling, again, supporting those scholar traits, with virtual EDU. Our Hopkins staff really also participate actively in supporting us through reporting the suspicious activity that they're seeing, whether it be a phishing email, whatever might be happening. So, and our partners in the work for this extend, both external and internal. So with that, the network replacement project is one of the biggest projects our department does. It's also a next generational leap in both data access as well as data security, as security continues to be a joint responsibility of everyone in the school district. This next hardware step supports the practices and procedures currently in place and allows our next evolutionary steps in ensuring our data stays secure. Please look for our project coming up in future board meeting. And with that, any time for questions that folks might have.
Thank you. I appreciate that thorough update, and just wanted to recognize timing. We're almost at the end of our time for workshop, and I want to give everyone a break. So I am going to propose, so that we can get our questions answered if we have any, that we defer our other agenda topic until our next workshop. Is that okay with everyone?
Yes.
Okay, great. So any questions?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. You sure? Okay. Thank you so much for that detailed PowerPoint. It was really informative and provided a lot of perspective around cybersecurity and how it impacts K-12 school districts. I just have a quick question. Could you explain what a security course, I think it's consortium? So can you explain what that is? I've seen that is Hopkins and a few other districts working together. Was it with Black Knight? But how does that work?
Yeah, thank you, Director Roper. The consortium that we are part of is 6 school districts working with Dark Knight Solutions. And what we've done there is it's kind of a multi-layer. First, early on, as I mentioned, we've been working together in that consortium for 8 years now. So early on, it was much more around a governance conversation. It was making sure that our policies are in place, our practices and procedures were being written. And so we would work together to share the costs, to develop some of those written pieces, which then we all could adapt into our organization, make local changes necessary, but then have those in place so that we all had a common operating understanding of what we were going to do as we move through both defending against an incident happening, and then if there were to be some kind of an incident, what does that response look like? So that was kind of early on in that relationship. Now it's a lot of information sharing. It's a lot of what we're seeing in our environments of both risk as well as some of the wins that we're seeing. What are some of the pieces that we're able to avoid either a risk or avoiding something that could have gone very badly that we were able to mitigate, stop, and defend our data from. So that consortium really works together. We meet on a monthly basis, and then annually we do a large workshop where we talk through, and we have experts come in and talk with us. We do tabletop exercises. As part of that, we develop tabletops. Our department does information security tabletop exercises at least quarterly. So we walk through, what is this going to look like should something happen? What is our response going to be? so that we have all of those pieces ready to go. So that's what, there again, from all of us working together, I think it ends up being better for all of us because we're talking with, what did you try? Did it work? And yep, I can take that knowledge now and make, whether it be our tabletops better or defending our data better.
Oh, thank you so much. So basically, it's coordinating your efforts around like a common mission for cybersecurity. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Chair
Thompson?
Andreessen. Thank you. And thanks for enabling some time here to ask these
Yeah,
important
absolutely.
topics. So thanks for the presentation. I really appreciated hearing, here's what we've done, and now here's what we're going to do with this project. So couple quick questions. How many bids do you think you'll get from the RFP? And will we be able to see, I know we'll see, here's the recommendation for board's approval, but will that info also say out of X number of bids that were received?
Yeah, absolutely. We hope to receive somewhere in like the 4 to 5 bid ballpark on that. Historically, that's about what we've received. When you look at the hardware manufacturers, there are probably 5 or 6 main manufacturers of equipment. And then you think of a couple organizations, you think 2 different vendors might choose the same one and, do competing bids. So yeah, we expect to be somewhere in that 3, 4, 5, hopefully in kind of the 4 to 5 bid ballpark. Yeah.
Thanks. And then I appreciated Director Zhao's question, the answer. I just think it's important to be clear that the funding for this is out of the capital projects levy, so it is not from operations or anything like that. This is set aside for projects like this. So appreciate that clarity. Then just my final question, and probably kind of naive as not a very technological person, but going back to that quote from the CISA director describing K-12 education as target rich, what type of data would a hacker be wanting to get that's stored at Hopkins? I'm generally thinking of hackers wanting, credit card numbers and social security numbers. So what do we have that makes it described as target rich?
Yeah, so not only, thank you for the question, Director Thompson. Not only do we have financial information, because we do process credit cards for some of the fees, as I outlined earlier, we also have a lot of student data. So we have a lot of relationships between people, not only for students, but adults. We have contact information, phone numbers, addresses, all of that information, as well as relationships. One of the biggest kind of vectors right now is understanding relationships between people. So I could come to you, whether it be a phishing email or whether it be, now we get, especially leading up to the election, you were getting those random text messages, and some even after the election. We were seeing some of that type of information of they can take that information now, instead of just saying the random, do you want to do dinner tonight? It would be, do you want to go to dinner tonight with person? Or, your mom by first name did a thing. It allows them to build a familiarity with individuals that can make them more susceptible to some of these attacks.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yep. And also, Director Thompson, you mentioned with the capital projects levy, it's important to note, yes, all of this is within the capital projects levy, and also because of the state rules with the capital projects levy, that is the only thing we're able to spend capital project levy monies on, is directly with those technology hardware and the people who support that.
Any other questions? I just had a couple of quick clarifying questions. So I'm wondering, I know that recently there was an increase in the amount of CPI funding we could use for things like more like software-oriented security things. There's been a movement away from, these kind of hardscape ideas and more funding being put toward this. Has there been any impact that we've seen in Hopkins on those shifts, or is it still kind of what you were showing us where there's like a 225 million ask and 25 million being set aside?
Right. Yeah, from our state and federal level, there's not been any movement on that. That was seen as kind of a trial run at the federal level this year, with that, 200 million, of which 3.7 billion requests on that. There's quite a lot of active conversation around, all right, so what does that mean? We know that we have nowhere near the resource necessary on that. Is that somewhere where, the federal government can step in and cover some of these cybersecurity pieces, especially at the state level, even being, we now have statute in place requiring us to report and requiring us to track these
Right.
pieces. That's another example of where we have a required tracking of information, but no funding
No
to
funding.
support the gathering of it and reporting of it.
So that would be a piece where we could start lobbying our legislatures to give us some increased resources.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And in the
thanks.
state of Minnesota, some federal resources did come to the state around cybersecurity, and in the state of Minnesota, that was a decision made at the state level of building out some of these frameworks like the Fusion Center and BCA now handling some of the reporting pieces on that. Some states chose to forward that money direct down to school districts, and that was not the case in the state of Minnesota.
Okay. And then quickly, I know that, and I might be getting this wrong, and I think it's important that we talk about cybersecurity in a really big picture, but in what ways does the systems we have in place impact something that I think we're seeing increases in is cyberbullying, or that kind of peer-to-peer interaction, or maybe even an outside force coming in and kind of creating a toxic and/or hostile environment for our students.
Yeah, and those are difficult to do. There have been some services out there that have purported to support that. A couple local school districts even use those services for some time, and both that I know of have discontinued that service because they found it to not be effective. Because that data, it is private information, whether that be a social media platform or something else. That's private information until it becomes a specific definable threat. So whether that be through bullying or whether that be through a threat against a person or organization, the State Fusion Center has had some success in that, working with our some social media platforms and getting, when there is those specific threat information, of getting that to the local police departments and school districts. We're seeing a little bit of work in that area, but it's been very slow to come on that, and really from the bullying side of that especially, and some of those and mental health pieces that you're seeing, kind of the outward look of that in social media, it's very difficult because it is private information that someone is expressing their opinion or expressing how they feel about something, until that becomes a specific definable threat, when either law enforcement or others can step in to then bring that information forward. That is a really difficult line to walk there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
With that, we have 5 minutes before the meeting starts, so thank you so much for your time and for this presentation and answering our questions.
Absolutely. Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you, Director Water.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will see you all back here in 5 minutes.
virtual, or would it? I was thinking maybe like, yeah, because Tuesday would be the day. But like, if that doesn't work for a bunch of people, then there won't.
There's a party wherever Rachel is. I don't know if you know that. We're not, no, or at least parents. Christmas or holiday celebration. It's called these days. We may be doing that. For extended family, for Ali, the brother and sister-in-law.
Yes. Hi, I'd like to invite my board colleagues to join us down at the front of the table so that we can recognize our amazing boys middle school cross-country team. So if you come on down.
We have a whole speech for you, so.
Yeah. Do you want to go?
Sit in the front or?
Yeah. And you can walk the whole runner too.
Yeah, I'm just.
Okay.
I did that.
Now I'm done. So welcome everyone here tonight. I'm glad that you are here to join us for what is our favorite part of board meetings, which is recognizing the amazing things that our students do in the district every day. And tonight we are recognizing the boys middle school cross-country team. They're a group of young athletes whose dedication, perseverance, and teamwork have brought pride and honor to our school and our community. The achievements of our boys cross-country team this season were remarkable. Cross-country is a sport that tests not only physical endurance, but also mental fortitude. It requires each runner to push beyond their limits, to face every challenge with resilience, and to support their teammates through every stride. This team has exemplified these qualities in abundance. Cross-country runners, throughout this season, you have shown us what it means to be true athletes. Your commitment to training, your determination in competition, and your unwavering sportsmanship have set you apart. You inspire us with your ability to overcome obstacles, lift each other up, and strive for excellence in every race. In addition to celebrating your victory this season, it's important to recognize the broader benefits of participating in sports, especially for middle school athletes like yourselves. Engaging in sports helps students excel academically by developing skills such as memorization, repetition, and learning, which are directly applicable to classroom success. The discipline and goal-setting abilities you cultivate through sports seamlessly translate to your academic achievements. So well done.
Thank you, Chair Andreessen, and I'm also excited to help recognize currently our only athlete present, but hopefully we'll have a couple more roll in. Sports also nurture a sense of inclusion and belonging, and being part of a team allows our athletes to form strong connections with their peers and coaches, creating a supportive community that extends beyond the classroom. So we're really proud of you, Max, and the other athletes. This particular victory brought great pride to our community, and you've really set a high standard for future teams to follow. We would also like to extend our heartfelt thanks to coaches McKenna Yesness and Nick Lovis, and we know that they developed really wonderful relationships with our middle school cross-country athletes. And speaking just from personal experience, I have a cross-country runner. My daughter, Maddie, in 7th grade was on the girls' team, so I went to a lot of your races, Max. So we thank our coaches for their guidance, support, and dedication, and we just really thank them for committing themselves after a long day of teaching to nurturing our young athletes and helping them grow off and on the field. So Max, we're going to invite you we want you to really relish in the whole experience. So go back to the back of the room so you get to walk up the whole Royal Blue Runner. So we're going to, we'll mention, oh, I think we have Mario with us as well. Yay. Right. So we're going to invite our cross-country athletes to walk the Royal Blue Runner when you hear your name, and then you'll just approach our school board members up here at the table, and they will provide you with your certificate. And these names are in alphabetical order. So Luca Arcia, and he's not here. Max Campbell. Hayden Funk. And why don't you hang out with us, because we'll take a photo at the end. Mario Muthama. And Mario, you were one of the captains, right? Yeah. Yeah. Max, were you one of the captains? No, okay. Mario, you came just in time and you missed a very long but wonderful speech. It's great to have you here. Galen Muretta. Beck Peterson. Oh. Nolan Varpness. So again, congratulations to our middle school boys cross-country team for your victory at state. That is really amazing. And audience members, let's also cheer on our parents. We don't have coaches with us, but let's give our parents and families a huge recognition for supporting your athletes who are also really great students. And thanks everyone for being here tonight, and we're going to do a group photo if you runners want to come up and hang out with us for a second. Come on, come on. Who's taking the photo? Oh, okay. Mario, did you intentionally miss the speech?
Because that's kind of the high school part of it. You can just say Hopkins will sent out a survey first.
Thank you. Oh, wait, there's more.
Yeah, parents, if you want to come up and grab a photo, that's fine too.
Yes.
Tomorrow at midnight. So you can say, like, trying to tell people to do this.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. We always say that you're welcome to stay for the meeting, but if you don't want to, that's fine too.
They have the endurance to last.
If it helps, it's a short one. Well, thank you again for being here. And we will get started with the first part of our, second part, really, of our meeting for Tuesday, November 26th. We have our open agenda, which includes our public comment. And I will just read through what that entails for our community. The Hopkins Public Schools values hearing from our community members because it is crucial for implementing Vision 2031. There are several ways to contact the board. You can do so via email. Instead of publicly commenting at a meeting, please use school-board@hopkinsschools.org. And on the school board page of the district website, you can find a Contact the Board form, which will email the entire board. We welcome a conversation with you. And at board meetings, public comment will be received both in person and through voicemail. Instructions for how to leave a voicemail to be played at the board meeting can be found in the board packet on the district website. We have 2 public comment sessions per meeting. The first is at the beginning of the meeting and prioritizes items that are on the agenda for that meeting. The second is at the end of the meeting and will be used when necessary. Each public comment section lasts for 30 minutes, and we allow comments up to 3 minutes for each person, as outlined in the board meeting protocols on the board website. If we have more community members than 10 per comment section, priority will be given to those comments pertaining to the agenda in this manner. The first 5 voicemails received will be played, and the first 5 people who submitted public comment cards will be invited to the table. This evening, we have not received any voicemails, and we have 3 public comment cards for people who have joined us here in person. Thank you for doing so. We always like a full crowd. And so I will invite people up to speak after I read the guidelines for public comment, which are long, so please bear with me. We ask that you please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Public comment is for input only. Members of the school board will not respond directly to public comments that are made at this meeting. No specific action will be taken at this meeting in response to comments that are made or issues that are raised during the public comment period related to items not on the agenda. If the board determines that action is appropriate, the action will occur at a future board meeting. If you have left your contact information on the comment card, a district representative may follow up with you after the meeting. I will recognize 1 speaker at a time. Only those speakers who are recognized will be permitted to speak. Individuals who interfere with or interrupt speakers, the board, or the proceedings may be asked to leave. Personal attacks on any individual, including any other speaker during the public comment session, are unacceptable, as are obscenities or profanity. Persistence in making such remarks will end the individual's opportunity to address the board and may result in the individual being directed to leave. I will rule out of order any statement that would violate state or federal law, school board policy, or the privacy rights of an individual. We're almost done. Minnesota's open meeting law prohibits the discussion of private educational data during an open meeting. Accordingly, during the public comment session, no person may discuss private educational data on an identifiable student. The open meeting law also requires the board to close a meeting for preliminary consideration of allegations against an employee. Accordingly, community members who have concerns about an employee or want to file a complaint or allegations against an employee are encouraged to contact the superintendent. We ask you not to name an employee by name during your comments. Repeated violations of these time, place, and manner restrictions may also lead to the meeting being briefly recessed. Community members will have an opportunity to be heard within the limits of the law and subject to the time, place, and manner restrictions above. Thank you so much for participating in public comment this evening and for getting through that long list with me. So first, I would like to invite to the board table Daniel Trajano. I hope correct me if I didn't. Please correct me. Who will be speaking about electric school bus opportunities. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Dr. Dan Trajano. I am a retired family physician and a population healthcare executive. I currently teach healthcare economics at the University of St. Thomas and serve on the board of directors for Health Professionals for a Healthy Climate, and also volunteer with several other climate and health advocacy organizations. So today, I am here to highlight an incredible opportunity for schools like Hopkins to transition from fossil fuel burning school buses to healthier, zero-emission electric school buses with billions of dollars in funding now available. So there's peer-reviewed research that shows reducing students' exposure to school bus fossil fuel emissions improves their health and academics. Students that were randomly selected to ride in lower emission buses had an 8% reduction in absenteeism, better standardized test scores, an increased lung capacity, and decreased lung inflammation. And these benefits are especially crucial for the hundreds of Hopkins students with asthma, which is the leading cause of chronic disease in children. So there are opportunities. Applications for the Minnesota Department of Commerce Electric School Bus Grant Program and the EPA Clean School Bus Rebate Program are now open, with deadlines that are quickly approaching on December 17th and January 9th. Electric buses offer not only health benefits, but also financial savings. Each electric bus can save the district between $4,000 to $11,000 annually in fuel and maintenance costs. And according to the World Resource Institute, the total cost of ownership of an electric bus in Hopkins is estimated to save over $140,000 per bus compared to a diesel counterpart when factoring in the EPA rebates, fueling, and operational savings. So I urge you, Hopkins, to partner with your transportation providers and apply for these grants now while they are still available. And transitioning to zero-emission buses will help our students breathe better and learn better. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge Director Roper, my friend over there, who volunteers with us in the Minnesota Coalition for Clean Transportation. And together with her son, we actually testified at the legislature advocating for Minnesota's $13 million in electric school bus funding that's now available. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have questions or need support in this effort. Let's take this opportunity now while it's available to improve the health and future of our students here in Hopkins.
Thank you. I will now invite Adam Minter to join us up here at the board, speaking on Jingjing Academy English program. Thank you for being here.
I have a handout for board members. I don't have enough for student members. I apologize, but
We can share.
yeah, this is it's a petition. So.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you for providing that.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Adam Minter. I'm a graduate of Hopkins High School. I'm also the parent of a fourth grade student at Jingjing Academy. I'm here speaking tonight on behalf of 70 parents who signed on to the petition that I'm distributing to you this evening. As Jingjing parents, we make a conscious choice to enroll our students into Hopkins schools. Some of us are from outside of Hopkins, from around the Twin Cities, as far away as Dayton. We're attracted and often recruited by other parents on the basis of the diverse Eisenhower student body. Most Chinese immersion programs are not as diverse. They don't have the Eisenhower environment as well as the rigorous academic environment that regularly places Xingxing's math and English scores in the top 10% of elementary programs in the state. Often, it's been higher. Those English scores are particularly remarkable considering that Xingxing students don't even start receiving regular English instruction until the 3rd grade. I think many people don't realize it. That fact alone draws students to the school. It attracts people via open enrollment. Just before this meeting, I was down at Trilingual Bingo, and I spoke to a Dutch parent of a Xingxing student who said she wouldn't have enrolled without the English instruction promise that Xingxing has. So it's quite a surprise, it was quite a surprise when we were informed just before the school year that our students would no longer receive a dedicated hour of English instruction every day from a dedicated English teacher. Instead, the model is being changed so that they receive 30 minutes of direct instruction daily from a tag team of 2 teachers, so each teacher instructs them 90 minutes per week, and then something called WIN, What I Need, which is supposed to be targeted instruction. 3 months into the school year, this is not working. Our students are spending most of their time on iPads. We've spoken to teachers, we've spoken to paras who are involved in this. They are telling us that they race through their exercises so that they can play games. The skill many of our 9 and 10-year-olds tell us that they've learned the most useful is they now know how to watch YouTube on iPads that are supposed to prevent it. And I'm not joking. They're not learning English. At a September 25th meeting with Xingxing parents, Melissa Ness, Eisenhower's principal, told us, and I'm quoting, "Students are not losing any English instruction. We are not changing the model for the English time or the number of English minutes per day." With respect to Melissa Ness, this isn't accurate. Our students' teachers are overwhelmed. Many of them are Chinese teachers who are expected to supervise WIN time. They barely have the training for it. So we have a request. This winter, following the winter administration of the Fast Bridge assessments, we ask that the district provide Xingxing parents with an in-person presentation of Xingxing's English scores from this year and the last 2 years. We would like to see a comparison of how this winter's English scores hold up compared to previous years by grade level and engage in a discussion of trends and why they're happening. This isn't just a Xingxing issue. The whole school is doing WIN. So if it's failing for our kids in Xingxing, it's failing for the other kids as well. The idea behind this was it was an equity initiative in part. We wanted equity of teachers. Equity in my mind means raising the bar for kids. But what this change is doing lowers it. So thank you. We want a partnership with you. Thank you for listening to me, and we look forward to hearing from you. Everybody's email addresses are on the petition.
Thank you for being here. And now I will invite Kelly Skumans, and please correct the last name again, who will be speaking on electric school bus grant program. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, so thank you for hearing comments about bringing electric school buses to ISD 270. My name is Kelly Skumats, and I am making remarks with dual perspectives. One is a co-parent to 3 kids who go to school in the district, and also as a staff member at Health Professionals for a Healthy Climate. My family includes 2 7th graders and 1 9th grader, and they all take the bus to school. One is involved in middle school cross country, another in marching band, and those activities also rely on school bus transportation to get to practices and events. I happen to drive an electric car, and at home there's genuine curiosity from the kids about my vehicle. We talk about the environmental impacts of fossil fuel versus electric, the economic benefits, differences in driving ranges, and maintenance needs, and more. And they didn't ask just once. They ask about it again and again. Our family also has a passenger van that runs on gas. Whenever there is an option to take my car, we do, and everyone appreciates the value of getting around in a non-emissions vehicle. Recently, the 9th grader came home and talked about their small engines teacher speaking to the class against electric vehicle technology, which seems to be opinion instead of instruction. This was disappointing to hear. Through my work at HPHC, I know public opinion to be overwhelmingly in favor of electric school buses, as I have been presented with the results of research that polled right-leaning, suburban, and outstate voters on climate-related issues. Of the clean energy proposals people were polled about, 92% say they somewhat support or strongly support electric school bus programs. This is second only to solar on schools. I believe this is because people understand that schools are where a clean environment equals good health, which equals good education. Applications for federal grant funds for electric school buses are open through January 9th, and I encourage this board to apply. Investing in electric school buses not only saves the district up to $11,000 in maintenance costs per year, it also sends a powerful message to students about planetary stewardship. Most importantly, though, electric school buses amount to significant health and school performance benefits, as mentioned by Dr. Trajano earlier. Being a member of a family with school-age kids comes with many blessings. Not only do I understand firsthand the health needs of growing bodies, I hear about kid concerns and see the future through their eyes. Kids greatly benefit from leadership and adult decision-making, which focuses on the long-term health of future generations. So for the 3 I have at home and the many others I've met through school activities and events, and their families and neighbors too, it would be really great to make school transportation cleaner and healthier for all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that is all the public comment requests we have for this evening. Thank you all for coming and for sharing your thoughts and ideas with the board. We really do appreciate it. And that brings us to our student board representatives' reports. I am super excited that there are a couple of student board reps here this evening. I know vacation officially started today, so very nice to see you here at the board table. Who is going first? I didn't even see you over there. Hi.
Hi. All right.
You're mixing it up on me.
Okay. Hi, I'm Praise. This is my second year on the board, and I am a senior this year. All right, starting off with the first thing, a couple weeks ago at the last board meeting, we spoke about the blood drive, and so I'll do a quick recap of how that went. Hopkins HOSA, Future Health Professionals, was the main organizer of the blood drive. They had tons of volunteers helping out the whole time, and we received a lot of, I guess, praise, no pun intended, from the Memorial Blood Centers Committee about how well the volunteers did. Students raised $710 in scholarship funds for graduating seniors, specifically from Memorial Blood Centers for the amount of donations, and we'll get into some of the numbers as well. We saved the lives of 133 local hospital patients with the amount of blood that was donated, and there was also 38 first-time donors that donated that Friday of the blood drive. Specifically for the numbers, we collected 39 whole blood units and then 32 double red blood cell units for 71 units in total. Just a quick note, the double red cell units, it sounds intimidating at first. It sounds like you're giving double blood, but it's actually less blood because you're taking just your blood cells instead of everything else that's usually in your blood. And then we also have plans for another drive in the spring. All right, some things related to seniors. The senior party is accepting donations as we head into Black Friday, specifically to donate raffle prizes. The senior party is 100% funded by donations, and the average cost to attend is about $75 for a senior. And so that's why it's free to attend, but the average cost typically comes out to $75. And then also the seniors have also started to order their caps and gowns. More things. The Wallen Scholarship recently visited Hopkins High School, giving a presentation in the Avid Classroom and in the College and Career Readiness Center about the scholarship that they offer. Similarly, the FAFSA actually opened early this year, which is really great because last year there was tons of issues related to the FAFSA, causing lots of delays and things like that. And so it was scheduled to open December 1st this year, and it typically opens October 1st, so December 1st was a little bit late, but it actually opened early, which is great. And then some final things, stay tuned for hopefully some more junior board members. And then we also, Student Board will be connecting with Student Council to kind of give a little post on their Instagram more about the Student Board.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Manuel, and I'm a sophomore student board representative. So as everyone knows, Thanksgiving break is coming up, and the high school will have Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday off this week. Next week, the high school will also have Thursday off for conferences and Friday off for professional development. In addition to Thanksgiving, there's another holiday taking place soon, the Hmong New Year, which celebrates the end of the traditional harvest season in Southeast Asia and is a time to gather with friends and family to remember ancestors. Fall sports are coming to an end and winter sports are beginning. Yesterday, the PAC, or Parent Athlete Coach meeting, happened to kick off winter sports. The winter sports that are beginning include hockey, basketball, alpine and Nordic skiing, adapted floor hockey, boys swim and dive, dance, gymnastics, and wrestling. Recently, the hockey team and girls basketball team had their media days, and the dance team had a showcase. The kindergarten information night was last Thursday from 5:30 to 7 p.m. and took place at the high school cafeteria. Incoming kindergarten students and their families were able to meet each elementary principal and learn about curriculum, program offerings, and our district visions of innovation from Dr. Mary Peary Reed. The event also included fun activities for children. And finally, the district newsletter called Update, which is a newsletter for all residents, has started up again this year, with the student board representatives being featured on the latest edition. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Iris. I'm a freshman. The first thing I have to talk about is the Newsies recap. Newsies was our school's fall musical. For anyone who doesn't know, it is a musical that takes place in 1899 about paper boys who go on strike. It included elementary and middle school grades, third grade and up, for a few different characters that were little kids. We also had 6 regular shows, 1 preview during Royals Connect, and 1 elementary show that took place on a DLD where elementary students came to the high school to watch the show, which was super fun. We also had a survey sent out relatively recently about cell phone policy, and it is closing very soon, so students are getting those last-minute surveys in. We should have a finished cell phone policy in March for the high school. Also, concert season is coming up. So first, we have the orchestra concert. This one will include the 10th grade orchestra, which is Sinfonia, and then Philharmonic, which is the junior-senior orchestra, and chamber orchestra, which is a before-school orchestra and it's the top orchestra. After that, we have the band orchestra, the band concert. This includes the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade band and a couple other before-school bands like Women in Jazz and different jazz groups. Then we have the freshman ensemble concert. This includes choir, orchestra, and band, but only the freshman ensembles. And then lastly, it is the choir concert, which includes, again, the 10th grade, the 11th and 12th grade ensemble, and then 2 different a cappella before-school ensembles that will be performing, and that takes place on December 17th.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any comments or questions for our student board reps?
Chair Andreessen.
Yes.
I have a quick question. The difficulties with FAFSA that you mentioned, those happened on the federal level, right? Like it was across the nation issues?
Yes,
and
that
they
happened on the
weren't
federal level.
and not specific to our senior class then? That's exciting.
Anyone else? Well, thank you. I appreciate how comprehensive the updates are. I really feel like I know what's going on at the high school without actually being there. So thank you. And that takes us to Dr. Mary Peary Reed for the superintendent report.
Thank you, Chair Andreessen. So as our student board reps mentioned, we do have a 5-day break coming up, and many of our staff will take that those 5 days and hopefully take time to rest. And in light of this break and the hard work that our staff do for our students and families, I do want to express my personal gratitude, and also on behalf of our school board, just gratitude to all of our Hopkins staff for what they do to ensure that every student is well cared for, learning and thriving. And in my gratitude message for staff today, I addressed it to our school staff and our district office staff, because a lot of times we find our messages are naturally oriented to teachers. But as we all know, we have clerical staff and paraprofessionals and bus drivers and nutrition services staff, our before and after care employees, our school leaders. There are so many different kinds of staff who work at our district office and in our school offices supporting teaching and learning. So just gratitude to all of our staff. Regardless of your role, you play an important part in the work that we do for our students. I also mentioned in the message today that the Thanksgiving holiday has a complicated history, and so it's also a time to acknowledge the displacement and hardships endured by our Native American colleagues and community members, to incorporate Native traditions into our celebrations and support Indigenous communities and causes. As I think it was Manuel mentioned, we hosted kindergarten information event last week, and that was planned and facilitated by our communications and marketing department and attended by our 2 new mascots, more than 400 families, lots of leaders and school staff. So thank you to Director Goldati and her team for organizing and for all who showed, including our amazing high school age volunteers. We had a ton of them interacting with the littles who will be in kindergarten next year and will be the class of 2038. Believe it or not, I know. So we look forward to partnering with our families throughout the enrollment process and beyond. This picture here is of Mr. Barnett's 3rd grade class here at Eisenhower. Students across Eisenhower Elementary are learning about new cafeteria incentives and are so excited about the incentives. So as you know, Eisenhower is a large elementary school, 800 students, and in a large elementary school, that also means that the cafeteria will be full of students during lunchtime, and it's really important for students to meet expectations so they can be safe and socialize in positive ways. So the admin and staff teams at Eisenhower have devised very clear and explicit lunchroom expectations, and lunchroom supervisors nominate a new class each week. The nominations are based on the lunchroom video expectations and the traits from the IB learner profile. And the winners are picked by school leaders Melissa and Sarah. So great job, staff and administration at Eisenhower Elementary, for focusing on incentives rather than punishments. Glen Lake had a special visitor recently. Brian from Cuckoo Kangaroo visited 3 kindergarten classrooms. He read books to students and performed one of his songs. And of course, Glen Lake had to sort him into one of their 4 houses. So House Revere, is that how we say it? Harry Potter, folks?
Yeah.
We're not getting sued here.
R-E-V-E-U-R, Revere or Revore, I'm not sure. But that house chose him. On this next slide, we're showcasing the work that Miss Christina, a speech language pathologist at Gatewood, is doing to advance students' knowledge about communication by facilitating an experience that culminates students' month-long school-wide focus on the IB Primary Years Program profile trait of communicator. Students learned about different types of communication: verbal, gestures, symbols, written, ASL, voice output communication devices, and so much more. And they had the opportunity to touch and use and explore different systems, including Gatewood's playground communication board, voice output communication devices, communication books, single message button switches, and so much more. And then students were able to come together and reflect on the benefits and challenges of different communication methods. So thanks to Miss Christina for all of the work that went into facilitating that learning for students. This next slide captures secondary students at Virtual EDU being joined by a team from the University of Minnesota. And this team from the U of M introduced students to the world of hydroponics. Hydroponics is a method of growing plants in a nutrition-rich water solution instead of soil. Students explored various gardening concepts related to hydroponics and even began planting their own seeds. Seeds will soon be placed in the hydroponic system that students will build using materials generously donated by the U. So thanks to the U of M for your generous donations, including time and talent. And as Iris mentioned earlier, hopefully you did get out to see Newsies at the high school. As she mentioned, there was a cast of more than 120 students, elementary, middle school, and high school aged, all working together to put together that marvelous musical. And I personally was very impressed. There may or may not be someone in the audience back there who attended every single show. We'll let you guess who that is. And we're very impressed, and much gratitude to our theater director, Farah Buffington, and her husband for all that they've done to transform the theater experiences at Hopkins High School. Now, when our students are not acting on stage, they're being scholarly in class. So this next piece, I wanted to share with you some data that we receive from an annual report from the University of Minnesota regarding our College in the Schools program, or CIS for short. CIS is a program that includes free University of Minnesota credits and exposure to rigorous college coursework. Students and alumni who are surveyed report high satisfaction levels, both with the overall quality of their CIS learning experience as well as the rigor provided within those courses. And one fascinating data point is that the value of University of Minnesota credits earned by students after 1 year's worth of CIS course enrollment at our high school equates to about $740,000 in tuition expenses. Additional data points include a majority of CIS instructors increasing their knowledge, pedagogy, and self-efficacy as instructors, and a vast majority of students completing the course with a C or better, including our students of color. And it's great that we have students in our CIS courses who do represent the total population at our high school. The CIS courses we offer are Spanish, Chinese, and anatomy and physiology. And we're going to move soon to our school spotlight, but before I introduce Mr. Johnson for that school spotlight, I did want to share some fall 2024 Panorama data with you. Panorama is a K-12 survey platform that is used by several school districts in Minnesota and also across the country. For example, Dallas, New York City, Tulsa, and San Francisco school districts are using Panorama. The survey addresses key issues such as school climate and safety, absenteeism, mental health, and teacher retention. In Hopkins, we administer Panorama to all students. Our 3rd through 12th graders self-report or self-assess, and teachers report for our kindergarten through 2nd graders. We've also intentionally adjusted some of the elementary questions to directly assess what we're hoping to learn about our students. So, for example, we've adjusted some questions to specifically gauge sense of belonging. Currently, 71% of our elementary student respondents said they feel a high sense of belonging at school. 25% reporting a lower sense of belonging. And I know that our school teams are digging into the class-by-class data to identify which students may be reporting not feeling any sense of belonging. Regarding sense of belonging at our middle school and high school levels, it's important to note that during the pandemic, from fall of 2019 through fall of 2021, sense of belonging in grades 6 through 12 decreased significantly. And we're really pleased to see that our fall 2024 results are the strongest they have been since the pandemic, with 13% feeling as though they completely belong, 38% feeling they mostly belong, 35% sharing they somewhat belong, and this data leaves us with a reason to dig into the variables that might contribute to about 15% of secondary students feeling as though they belong only a little bit or not at all. And finally, you can see on that slide here, we're very heartened to also see a large increase, 15% increase in middle and high school students reporting that they are experiencing a huge amount of support or a lot of support from teachers and other school adults. So as I said, Panorama gives us really, really good information on how our students are feeling about their schooling experiences, and our school leaders and instructional leadership teams at our schools use this data to inform and monitor goals. Okay, and without further ado, I'm going to introduce Mr. Demond Johnson, who is one of our fabulous school leaders here in Hopkins. He is the school leader at Virtual EDU, and Virtual EDU is a newer program for us, serving kindergarten through grade 12 students. It's Minnesota's first blended learning program, and Virtual EDU is an example of a school that works very intentionally to address sense of belonging with students. So, Demond, welcome to the board table. We're very grateful for your service here in Hopkins, and invite you to share a couple of highlights about Virtual EDU.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate all of you taking the time to have us here, have me here representing Virtual EDU as a new program, as a new school in Hopkins. So Virtual EDU, as you see this quote here, we are committed to providing a holistic education for our scholars. We really hope to prioritize well-being and development. So when doing that, we have many students who come to us and say things such as, this is the place where I feel most like myself, which then really fills the bucket of our staff and then really makes them really want to be more committed to the restorative practices and align their teaching and their learning to some social-emotional learning as well. So what makes us unique at Virtual EDU? We have smaller class sizes. We offer multi-age classes, and which allows our teachers to build really strong personalized relationships with them. We also provide monthly check-ins instead of the conferences. We do monthly check-ins, so a learning facilitator would call families once a month and share with them academic updates, wellness updates, and things of that nature. So a snapshot of our community. We currently have 179 scholars, which is an increase of what we started from the beginning of the year. We were at 141, and scholars are able to come to us from anywhere in Minnesota, which opens up more global travel opportunities for families. So sometimes we see families who come to us and they would like to go travel to Europe for a 2-week period of time and then continue on with their education. And they're able to do that and then come back to Minnesota and have that travel without their education being interrupted. Who we serve, as you can see, 50% of our elementary scholars are students of color, 62% of our secondary scholars are students of color, and the Hopkins average is 51%. So we are right on average at the elementary level, and we are above average at the secondary level. And then one cool thing that I like to bring up is our open enrollment data. 54% of our elementary students are open enrolled, and then 50% of our secondary students are open enrolled. So the school culture we build here at Virtual EDU with our students, with our families, with our staff, it breaks down perceptions of what online learning is. And as you can see through the panorama survey that Dr. Imar mentioned to you guys earlier, our scholars have positive feelings towards school at the elementary level and then at the secondary level as well. So with us creating a culture where scholars are able to be themselves, we are able to demystify the experience that online learning is not a connection, but we are actually really connected with our scholars in a deep way. All right, so what's happening at Virtual EDU? We have a partnership with the University of Minnesota, which was started by an elementary parent at Virtual EDU. She came to me and said, hey, I work at the U of M. We have this green superheroes of science. Can we bring it to Virtual EDU? I said, sure, let's do it. So initially last year we had secondary scholars train elementary scholars on how to do different science projects. And then this year the U of M wrote us into their grant where they're able to fund a teacher to come to our site once a week to then teach about hydroponics. So now our secondary scholars are able to learn with a U of M professor, a master gardener, about hydroponics. So at Virtual EDU, we're really big on breaking down barriers and making sure that we are bringing others from the community into our space to be a resource to our scholars. So another resource that we brought in is the Metropolitan Mosquito Control, and they came in because we're really big on project-based learning, and we take concepts such as cause and effect and law and order, and we tie it into things such as mosquito control. So what happened here was the students were able to meet with this representative named Alex, and he was able to give them a real-world impact on how the government organizations have collected data on mosquitoes, and then how they're able to share that information with communities and how different mosquitoes impact our environment versus the southern environment. Another partnership that we all have is through the Hopkins Educational Foundation. They funded us a Peace Garden in a functional fitness space. So this Peace Garden, scholars and staff were able to work on it throughout the summer of August, and then throughout the fall, we purchased picnic tables, we purchased a bunch of mulch, many wildflowers that will come to us in the spring that will be planted, and then we put different signs out in our garden that reminded students of SEL, such as like breathe, pause, take five deep breaths and things like that. So they could easily be reminded when they're in their garden, different skills that we're teaching them in SEL daily. And then we have the functional fitness space. It's on the first and the third floor now, because we also have Hopkins East Learning Program, as well as Virtual EDU in the same building. So we're able to have a functional fitness space where scholars are able to go work out, get buff, do those different type of things. We have a punching bag. They can go in there, put gloves on, and throw hands with the punching bag if they feel the need to. So what's new at Virtual EDU? Currently, we worked on getting credit recovery at our site. So I've worked with Paris Timmons to figure out a way we can provide credit recovery at Virtual EDU, and now we're able to provide before and after school credit recovery for about 15 to 16 scholars at Virtual EDU, so that was a big step for us. Another cool thing is using our space. So working with community ed to use that really beautiful building that we have to provide after-school programming. So within that grant that the U of M wrote for us, they put in that they're willing to pay for a person to come to our site to teach hydroponics before or after school. So we'll soon be able to have after-school programming at Virtual EDU. And then another thing we're working on is a supplemental license. We currently have a comprehensive license, which allows us to have students fully enrolled at our site. A supplemental license would allow, like you high school scholars to say, hey, I want to take an online class at Virtual EDU. You can choose a class you would like and then still have your full caseload at the high school. So you could have an online and an in-person experience throughout the high school. So that is what we're currently working on at Virtual EDU. So just a reminder that students in our program, they tell us time and time again how they thrive in our student-centered community, and we really thrive in supporting and prioritizing a balance of social, mental, and physical health to allow our scholars to be flexible. And then we just try to be as flexible as possible with our caregivers, so that way they understand the environment that we're providing for their scholars. So with this quote, as you can see, scholars, they really enjoy this environment as it's student-centered and personalized. So we want to continue to have this space for students at Hopkins. So thank you for your time and spotlighting Virtual EDU.
Thank you for being here.
Chair Andreessen?
Yes.
May I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That was so informative. But with the supplemental courses that students at the high school could take, would they be free of charge?
Yeah, yes. So you don't have to worry about the dollars and all of those great things. But yeah, they would be free of charge. You would just take it. You're a Hopkins student, so you would have access to taking those classes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I just ask because I did take a summer course online this past summer, and it unfortunately costed money. But yeah, that's so amazing that that could be something in the future. I'm sad that I'm graduating, but
We're sad too. So proud. Any other questions or comments?
Chair Andreessen?
Yes.
Yes, I do have a question. So how, and I know it's early days and you're a new program, but how have you been finding your student outcomes? You know, your graduation rates, your people moving on to college, test scores, et cetera?
Yeah, we look really close with data. We work with an amazing data specialist named Jillian Randall in the district, and she works with our counselor who then focuses on those different data points. So right now we had to create a college profile. So we were looking really close at our graduation rates. We're looking closely at our ACT rates, and we're looking closely at which colleges scholars are going to. So I don't have those numbers off the top, but I could definitely pull them up quickly and share with you those rates.
That'd be great, thank you.
Chair Andreessen?
Yes.
Just listening to your wonderful presentation made me think about how this was one of the really positive things that came out of the pandemic. And I remember when we were ideating on, what kind of virtual learning environment we wanted to offer, and this idea of a hybrid environment that was really focused on personalized learning and building strong relationships, started to come to the fore. And it's just so exciting to see how it's flourished under your leadership. And I want to thank you. I'm curious, what is the current enrollment right now at VDU?
Our current enrollment is at 179.
Okay.
So we have 29 elementary and then the difference in secondary.
Yeah.
150.
Great. Thank you.
Chair Andreessen.
Yes.
Beautiful presentation. Enjoyed it. I have a question that I don't know if you can answer, but do you see virtual EDU moving, to Praise's point, in the direction of Coursera and being able to offer college in the school virtually? So like if Praise or if Iris or whomever wants to take a college course, get credit eventually from the U or from whatever college they want to transfer to, and then that would probably be a model that I'm not sure what our competition like Minnetonka or anybody else has where we could say, hey, students at Minnetonka, you could take a virtual EDU course, and obviously they would have to pay money for it since they're not Hopkins school student, but is that something that obviously a consideration for a potential model in the future?
I would say yes, it is something that we can add into our plan. One thing that we want to just start with is just getting a supplemental license initially, and then seeing how that works with the staff that we have and how we could potentially be funded, because that is a whole nother project of teaching on top of the comprehensive style that we have. Now, one thing that we're doing, I'm happy that you asked this question, because we really, we take the time to look at what we're providing compared to others online schools. And one thing we want to focus on is providing like college and schools at virtual EDU. So when scholars are having things on their transcripts, they can have like a CIS on their transcript, or they can have an honors class, because those are really big to have on those transcripts when they're going to those big name schools. So what we did, we're a project-based learning school. Scholars can right now earn honors classes and earn credit for honors classes through doing all of the work that the learning facilitator initially has set up for them, and then they may earn like a 5 out of the 8. And then if they go above and beyond, getting that 6, 7, or 8, then they're able to earn honors right now. But for college and schools, I would have to work with the high school to figure out a way we can partner and then bring that to virtual EDU, but that is something that we should consider.
Thank you.
Were you able to pull up the data you were?
Yes, so currently, right now, you are asking for the graduation rates. So last year, we graduated 72% of our seniors. We do have a lot of our seniors coming to us credit deficient. And with that being said, it's really cool to see our seniors who really want to work hard towards graduation work past the time that they're originally allocated to graduate, and come back to us and say thank you for just being here and taking the time to work with us. Even this year, I was able to hand out 4 diplomas after graduation, which is a really big deal. So that we are making sure that seniors understand what credits they have and what we can do to support them. So even though our rates are at 72%, we get seniors coming to us with 23 credits, and within 2 years, we're able to help them graduate, and that's a big deal.
Oh.
And then ACT scores for us, our average ACT score is a 19.7. And the top 4 college choices from virtual EDU would be the U of M, St. Thomas, St. Olaf, and Mankato.
Thank you for that.
So, Damon, the 4 seniors who returned and later graduated after commencement day, are they part of the 72%?
They would not be a part of that
Okay.
72%.
So then if we include them, then our rate is
it would
a bit
increase.
higher. Awesome.
But the 72% is based on that graduation day, because I tried to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? I had just one question that came to my mind because I saw the statistic on your presentation is that 60% of virtual EDU students are free and reduced lunch. And I am wondering, how does that work with virtual EDU, with students getting meals now that we can provide them?
Yeah, so the scholars who are at home doing online learning, they wouldn't receive the meals from us, but the scholars who do come in person for the blended learning days on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, we do walk over to Meadowbrook to have the hot meal for breakfast and lunch. And then, yeah, so that's how they're getting their nutrition. Last year, they would receive cold breakfast and lunch from Nutrition, who did amazing. They would bring it to our site and then provide us with that. But then scholars advocated for hot lunches, so that was the way we were able to do it.
Nice. Is there any plans in the work to start providing meals for those students who are at home? Or is that not something that they've indicated that they need?
Currently, that is not something that we're doing. If scholars do need extra support with things like that, we have an amazing social worker named Brian Lloyd, who goes to different resources and then brings them to their home or brings them to the school for them to pick up.
Oh, great.
So like now we have our own mini food shelf and clothing closet at virtual EDU for scholars.
Mr. Johnson, I think current nutrition guidelines prevented us from feeding scholars on a virtual learning day, correct?
That is correct. I didn't want to speak to that without being 100% accurate, but I do recall that there was something with nutrition that prevented us with providing.
We tried to figure out a workaround.
Thank you.
I believe it was something with student count and having the student be in the lunchroom to be able to count for it with reimbursement or something of that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But
I don't think there are any more questions. Thanks so much for being here.
No, thank
Really
you.
Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much, Mr. Johnson. Great work.
Yes,
Thank you.
exciting things.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you for your report. Does any questions or comments for the superintendent's report?
Chair Andreessen?
Yes.
Yes, I do have a question for Dr. Mary Perried. So for CIS, looking at the statistics about satisfaction and, credits and college credits, is there an opportunity to expand the program? Does it come down to cost? Like, why only Chinese, Spanish, and anatomy and not English and calculus and all that other stuff?
It's a good question, and I know that I've heard Principal Ballard talk about expanding CIS opportunities. I do know that there are some minimum qualifications that teachers have to meet as required by the university system, and beyond that, I'm not sure what the additional hurdles are, but we can find out specifics and get back to you. But we are, of course, as a high school that wants to figure out how to get students as college ready as possible, but also graduate with as many college credits as possible. That's, that's a passion and specific interest of ours, so I can get you specifics on what additional barriers might be.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we can move on to the approval of tonight's agenda. I would look for a motion.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda is approved, and we now go on to the consent calendar. The purpose of the consent calendar is for items that provide the board with information considered to be more routine in nature. If the board deems an item to be necessary for additional discussion, a motion will be made to move the item to new business. I would look for a recommendation to approve the consent calendar.
Chair Andreessen, I just had a
Yes.
comment about the minutes from the last school board meeting.
Yes.
It lists me as being in attendance. I was not. I was attending to a sick family member. And so I would move that we approve the consent calendar with that correction that I was not in attendance on November 12th.
Thank you for that. And any other, any other discussion? Seeing none, I would look for a motion to approve the consent calendar with correction to the minutes for the regular meeting of the school board for November 12th, removing Director Jen Westmoreland's name as present and putting it into school board members absent.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent calendar has been approved. That takes us to our treasurer's report. Treasurer Hartland.
Wonderful, thank you. Good evening, everybody, and thank you to all who are joining us. The topic I would like to provide a little bit of context on tonight is ESSER dollars, and ESSER stands for the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Funds that were introduced as part of the federal COVID-19 relief packages to support schools during the pandemic. And the goal of those dollars was to prevent and mitigate health and safety challenges faced by districts and their staff and students, to help get schools started on e-learning, and to provide all the devices and services that schools needed, both during the active pandemic times and then after, up until now. Those funds came in 3 waves, and the reason that I'm discussing it now is that the last of those, you don't have to quite spend them yet, but you had to promise, you had to obligate your funds by September of 2024. And those funds could be used in a lot of ways to buy technology, though Hopkins already had a 1 device to 1 student ratio, and quite a few of the air improvement upgrades already. But we were still able to make use of a lot of ESSER dollars to provide internet hotspots for our students, to update learning management systems, so software subscriptions and other devices and platforms needed to administer education during that kind of zany time. It could pay for classroom equipment, cleaning equipment, and even staff members in certain cases, though Hopkins did hardly any of that, paying for staff specifically because of this cliff that all school districts across the nation are going to be facing, where we will no longer have this funding stream. And so going forward, so in our past 3 years' budget, we had ESSER dollars as some revenue, and we won't see that going forward anymore. And so to use some of our last ESSER dollar funds, you can see on this period's treasurer report that we spent $47,000 on specialty vacuum and cleaning equipment as allowed by ESSER dollars, and that expense had to go through required steps with the Minnesota Department of Education to ensure we were using those funds appropriately. Other expenses of note were $3,043 spent with Groth and Schmidt music companies for purchasing music pieces for our students to play and repairing instruments. The district spent $4,148 on language interpreting services. Pertinent to our earlier community comments about electric vehicles, we spent approximately $5,957 on fuel just for our smaller vehicles and mowers and the machines that we operate in the district, not on buses. We spent $958 on first aid supplies with Cintas. In the past couple of board reports, I've talked about maintaining the various equipment that we have across the district. In this period, we paid $4,884 to clean oven hoods at 7 of our site kitchens. $2,730 was spent on transportation for a charter school, students that go to a charter school in our district. $4,835 was spent on specialized transportation for a single student. We paid a local company, Nystrom Publishing, $16,101 for various mailers that the district produces and sends to our community members. And just as an example, one of them, the kindergarten brochure, cost a bit over $3,100 to print and mail. Finally, we paid Waconia Vet Clinic $179.86 for checkups for the goats at Gatewood. And with that, I move that we approve total disbursements in the amount of $1,885,654.56 for the period of November 1st to November 15th, 2024.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Treasurer Hartland?
Yes, could I?
Sorry, Chair
Clerk
Andreessen.
Thompson?
Question for Treasurer Hartland. You had mentioned that, these were going to start looking better, and I really like how it's kind of broken up. It's got the food service chunk, the, repairs on schools chunk, that type of thing. I think just 2 charges I had sort of a question on. Do you have $1,976 for pumpkins? Do you have Any idea what that, I mean, I understand it was maybe Halloween-ish time, but like, that seems like a lot of pumpkins.
Seems like a lot of pumpkins. Some of those specific ones that pertain to a particular class or a particular field trip experience, I could not speak directly to. I would be happy to follow up with you on that one. Oh,
There was a fall festival at Gatewood, yes.
And I went, I don't remember seeing a ton of pumpkins. We'll have to find out.
It just seems like a lot. So, yeah, okay, thank you. And then my other question was, there is a charge for $23,700 to Paul Emmerich France Tutoring and Consulting LLC. Do you know what that is and is more expected? And what does that one do? Do you know?
Yes, so we do, I don't know how many schools currently have a consulting contract with Paul France, but he worked with our instructional leadership team last year and a few of our schools, and I know that he has been partnering with instructional leadership teams at Meadowbrook, maybe?
Meadowbrook West and Glen Lake.
Meadowbrook West and Glen Lake.
Is that all?
And do you know, so he's partnering with those schools and their instructional leadership team to do what?
So some of his activities include visiting classrooms and giving feedback on quality of instruction, providing professional development to staff at those schools, aligned to our Hopkins Learning and Teaching Framework, giving teachers feedback, giving school feedback on the quality of teaching and learning happening in classrooms, things like that.
Okay, and I mean, I know we had the presentation from the floating principal, who also seems to do some of that stuff too, right? So I guess I'm just curious the need to pay an outside consultant to do that too, as opposed to doing it in-house, is, I guess, my general question.
Perhaps we could follow up with that via email.
That sounds good. Yeah, and I'd just be interested to see, total amount being spent there, because that's a pretty big check for 1 2-week period, so.
Yeah, that would be good to include in an email if you want to.
All right,
Yeah.
sounds good. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And-
Any other discussion?
yes, Chair Andreessen. Something that I note sometimes in my reports is that those expenditures don't necessarily reflect 2 weeks of expenditures. That's when an invoice is paid.
Understood.
So.
Right.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The treasurer's report is approved, and that takes us to our first order of new business, which is policies in first read. I will turn it over to Vice Chair Ross.
Excellent. So we're going to have 5 particular policies, 409, 410, 414, 418, and 419, that we're going to review with the collective here at the board table. And then, obviously, we'll be looking to move this over to second read. So with that, I will hand this over to Assistant Superintendent Nick Lightfoot to walk you guys through which ones have changes and which ones do not have changes. So we will go from there.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us, Nick.
Good evening. Good to be with you. So for this evening, the monitoring committee has been working on the 400 series. Some of these are in front of you this evening for review, the first of which is Hopkins Policy 409. At this point, we are not recommending specific change for 409, which is the employee publication, really intellectual property that we have here in Hopkins. If there are specific questions to 409 as a particular policy, I would be more than happy to assist.
I don't see any.
All right, 410 is FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act. There was a specific change done to this policy based on the earned sick and safe time changes that were done in Minnesota statute. The policy reflects that as to the initial qualification period, which is different under federal law than it is under Minnesota law. That adjustment is made in policy 410. If there's a particular question to that, I'm certainly open to any other questions that may be any other part of the policy as well.
Chair Andreessen.
Yes, Director Zhao.
Yes. Dr. Lightfoot, do we expect any impact to employees at all? Is it just an accounting thing, or is there some potential impact, negative or positive, for the employees?
What it did, great question. Thank you for that. The change, what it did is it made the qualification period for leave different and allowed for particular leave and inclusion of earned sick and safe time, which can be and is in Hopkins front end loaded so that individuals can utilize that leave on the front end should they have a need at the start of that year. So that's in particular, if you think about what that change really brought forward with that language, that's really what it was designed to be more specifically in line with, given the change that was done with the recent legislative sessions related to earned sick and safe time.
So it's better? Is that, if you had to summarize it, it's better for the employees? Or just different?
Different.
Different, okay.
Different people have different needs at different time. So if better means that more people may be able to access it at a greater point in time, then that's really kind of what was accomplished at that point.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I did have a question. I was wondering if we would be able to take out the bolded section in the middle, the note, or do we feel like it adds some clarity to the policy? I just feel like it's kind of more back-end information.
Minnesota School Board Association guidance, particular to a rolling 12-month period versus how we do that. We have that 12-month rolling period identified in the first line of it, so certainly we could take that bolded language out. It just really reflects the choice that the district has as an organization of which period of time to use and how it would be used.
So we might want to leave it in just for future monitoring committees. I'm worried if we take it out, then it's lost.
Oh, could we put it at the bottom? I'm just worried about usability from a forward-facing, like front-facing document for employees.
And the bold makes it seem like it's more important
Right,
than the other
and it's
text.
less.
So, yes, I wonder if we use italics instead.
Or if we just
Unbold.
move it to the bottom.
Sure. I'm fine
So
with
it's
that,
not
too.
lost, which I get that it's an important thing for the monitoring committee to have, but maybe not necessarily for employees.
I think it might be there because of that's where they're specifically talking about the 12-month period in the model policy.
Yeah, I understand why it's there.
Okay.
But I think, per your point, it's for us and not for people who would be using this policy, if that makes sense. I just feel like policies don't need to be any longer than they need to be for like people who are actually trying to read them. And this just makes it longer.
I think the language, though, if a school district changes its definition of a year in this policy, it must give employees notice of at least 60 days. That feels important. Like, I'm trying to put myself in the position of an employee. I would want to know what the obligations of the school district are in terms of informing me of my rights under this policy.
Any other thoughts?
My vote would be unbold, put it in italics, let it ride.
That sounds like an acceptable.
I would say unbold, no italics, because it's in brackets.
I can live with that.
Okay.
This is a scintillating meeting.
So what I'm hearing at this point
I
is,
don't think there are really any changes that need to be made.
just so I understand, are we keeping the bold? Are we,
We're getting rid of the bolds.
got it. So we will unbold, no italics, keep the brackets.
Yep.
Great. Other questions related to 410?
No, thank you, Chair Andreessen and Director Westmoreland for highlighting that and kind of getting that situated. I appreciate that. I just want to just clarify, so for the FMLA, if there was a pregnant employee, they would get the full 12 weeks paid without having to use their sick time and pay leave, or would they have to use it? And if they didn't have any, like, is there any other way that they could, like, apply for maybe,
Those are all
like,
different,
unemployment or
unique sets
something?
of circumstances. The FMLA is a broad component, so we work with individuals based on their own balances, based on contract leave, and all of those other elements that are part of it as well. This is the general federal protection that comes forward. So these are the broad-based elements, and then there are also, in addition, other considerations for individual contracts as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I don't see any.
All right. If there aren't any other questions then on 410, the next policy is 414, which is mandated reporting. This is a statutory reference. The statutory reference was included in 414. That's really the modification and the update of the policy is to the updated statute. So if there are additional questions on 414, I'm happy to address those.
I did just have a question as to why registration of predatory offenders was taken out. I'm sorry, oh gosh, there's so many. In definitions, L at the very end.
Just double checking that, just to make sure it's not error here. I just want to double check the Minnesota School Board Association. I thought that was the legislative change on the red line document, what I'm looking at here. We'll double check that one. Because I believe the additional element that was added within the statute was for that inclusion of that information. 260.
That's what I was wondering, is it redundant because it's included statute in the
Could have-
statute? Or
Yeah, the statute's listed there. What I was looking for is the element that's just trying to match that up, because in Hopkins, the 414 changes that were noted, particularly for that one section and that segment is for L under the abuse definition. I just want to make sure that I pull that one up for us there.
That is the title of that statute, if that helps.
Registration of predatory offenders.
Yeah.
I just looked it
Yeah,
up.
that's what I was wondering. If it's redundant.
It's redundant.
Oh, it's,
Yeah, and so that was the recommended action from MSBA, was that restatement. So I don't have the statute pulled up, but that was what we were following.
Okay. That makes sense. I just wanted to make sure we weren't taking something out. I think that's all the questions.
All right. We'll double check that just to make sure in second read.
Thanks.
If nothing further on that, then 418. 418 is drug-free schools and workplace. This, there again, was a statutory update that was listed in as far as the exception segment that was added under C. It was added for that specific protection. That is the change that was recommended in 418. We're recommending adoption of that as well. Questions on 418? All right. Then the last one is another statutory change on 419. 419 is the tobacco-free environment. There again, legislative work was done for policy 419 under the change recommended under the Minnesota School Board Association. That one is the additional language that is included for your review in the exceptions listed there as well, Part C. Questions on 419?
Chair Andreessen?
Yes.
I do have a
Director Zhao.
question. So does the site administrator or building administrator know what to do, right? Like, so we make this provision, are they aware, and do they have the support necessary to?
Yeah, if there are questions or anything that need to come forward, site administrators, that's why we have all these on the web, and if there are questions, certainly those resources are available internally for anything that would occur or questions that would come up as well.
So we've done the work to make sure that they're ready.
Mhm.
Okay, good.
Well, and we also have, I believe, district-level staff that can help
Mhm.
with that, correct? Any other questions? Well, with that, I would look for a motion that we approve the listed, policies in first read, and further that we direct the administration to prepare the policies with any suggested revisions for approval in second reading at the next meeting as part of consent. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So move.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The policies have been approved. And I believe that wraps up our business for this evening. I'm like, my documents are knee-deep in policies. So I believe we are moving on to our board member reports. Is that correct? Oh, the calendar, sorry, thank you. And I believe you get to stay here with us, Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot,
Absolutely.
as we discuss the calendar.
Well, what's in front of you this evening, for those for whom the setting of the calendar may be a first-time experience, the calendar in and of itself, we look at either on a one-year or two-year basis. What we try to do is look at all of the elements that go into the basic foundations of the calendar, double-check every set of information, count the number of days, double count the number of days, triple count the number of days, and then recognize that even after you looked at everything, you might have included last year's dates for Eid instead of this year's dates for Eid.
Good thing people are paying
so
attention to their emails.
we have nice, willing individuals that look and relook at and go back through multiple times to make sure that we get the information accurate. That's why we bring it forward for you as a board, first and first read, to provide some basic sets of input that we go back, we work on, we put together with our Education Association partners to come up with and look at where we present to you, either next session or the session thereafter, a more complete draft for board comment and review. And in this initial section, really what we try to look at, are there some key issues that are developing within the calendar? Are there some items of particular input that are needed? And those can change at any given time. In part, some of the major questions that are generally in front of a board may depend on, do we start before Labor Day? Because that may have some different impacts for summer construction, specifically on individual projects that we may need to be aware of. Do we have multiple options where different opportunities for a winter break may have some advantages or impacts that we want to think through? And then, of course, we always look at the start and the end of the school year. If you take a look at the calendar document that I put together for you, I tried to include some of those foundational elements on the kind of cover page that says, as we look at the conference structures that we have, as we look at where we see professional development days falling generally within the year, know that we're trying to maximize professional development as we do look at the impact of the READ Act and wanting to make sure that we have days accounted for, that we also look at the contractual number of days that's outlined there, as well as the state required number of days, build all of that together to make sure that we have the recommended elements contained, that we have the required elements addressed, and that all of this fits together in a package that we can get out to our community as soon as we're able to in January, so that it can assist with people's planning for the next school year. A couple elements that I think are important is, one of the things that the board generally tries to do is look at when it can end in June. Part of what we're looking at, as you'll see, there are some days that are left within those last 2 weeks in June. We're trying to balance out what we have as far as meeting the days of instruction. If you look, we're looking at where those could fall within the high school to make sure that we have the 4-term structure, that we have 165 days of instruction built in, looking at that start that happens after Labor Day. Even though it occurs early in September, it still has an impact when we look at fitting in that 165 days and what it looks like if we were to end on the 5th versus the 8th or the 9th, and making sure we meet that 165. So that's why there was an asterisk right there at the end on the 5th, because we're looking at, well, what does that look like for our elementary programs? What does that look like for our middle programs? And then how does that factor in for our high school programs to make sure that all of those are aligned? Part that I think, at least with this calendar, that does work out well is that sometimes you are also looking at, when does a winter break happen? When does a spring break happen? And that, for those kinds of impacts, we often look at the 4-term number of days so that we don't end up with one term disproportionate than the other. I'm happy to report that the preliminary pieces and the preliminary work that we've done seem to balance those out, with a little bit more pending or possible within the fourth term that may result as we may need to go to that 8th and 9th to meet in June to meet that 165. It means that we may have a little bit more for quarter 4, but much of the feedback that we've gotten with quarter 4, term 4 at the high school is that many of those term 4 days, because it's at the end of the year, because it's with graduation, if there is one that does tend to be a little bit longer because of some of the other elements that are happening toward the end of the year, there usually is a little bit more flexibility if we need to have that term a little bit longer. So that's what we've been looking at. We've also been looking at the placement of where those days would fall to meet the conferencing schedule as well as professional development. So, in essence, it's this general set of information for you as the board to provide some additional feedback as we've just kind of put the foundational elements together for some additional considerations before we go back and do the next level of work, which is to get more particular about this, even though we've started to get particular, just not as particular as the final would need. So with that, specific questions, comments, insights, other elements that might be helpful for you that we can provide.
Thank you. Any questions, comments?
Chair Andreessen?
Yes, Clerk Thompson.
Well, thanks for that presentation, Dr. Lightfoot. Obviously, first time I've seen this. My gut reaction is it looks very reasonable. And yeah, I mean, the question I was going to ask is like, how do you determine which week spring break would be? But you already answered that as far as balancing number of days in the quarters. So that makes sense. I guess so. Just to say one more time, the reason that you asterisk June 5th as the last day is because as you really put pen to paper to count the number of days students need to be in class, it might have to flex. It just, yeah, I don't know. I don't love the thought of like, hey, you got to come back for like a day or two after a weekend. It just seems a little odd, but I know you'll be doing your best as you look at that, so.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you for those observations and comments. That's exactly spot on. We're trying to fit everything to see if we could make the 5th work. It is so tight right now that one day here or there means that we will need to look at June 8th and 9th. We're doing our best. We'll see what we can do with some flexibility along the way. But I always like to kind of say if we can manage expectations, it might happen that we need to look at the 8th and 9th.
Chair Andreessen.
Yes, Director Westmoreland.
I just wanted to note this board's commitment and our district's commitment to calendar equity and respecting the major Jewish and Muslim holidays. And we are not the only district in the state that has made this commitment to our community. And I know that definitely our neighboring district of St. Louis Park is also working through their calendar right now, and they reached out for some thought partnership around how we are navigating the fact that most, if not all, of these major holidays fall on instructional days that we, of course, will not have as instructional days because we've made that commitment, which is why the Eid al-Fitr dates came up in conversation with my colleagues in St. Louis Park. So just wanted to put that out there that we're not the only school district having calendar conversations, and when it comes to the calendar equity piece, that we have a lot of great folks that we can reach out to and thought partner with in other districts as well. So.
Thank you.
Chair
Anyone?
Andreessen? Yes. So Dr. Lightfoot, so totally understand it's a very complicated beast with lots of different moving parts. And I know there's a minimum number of days, but is there any thought given to kind of like trying to string them consecutively as much as possible? For example, when I hear, okay, we have Thanksgiving break, and then we come back, and then there's conferences the next week, I worry a little bit that, the teachers can't really get back up to speed before things get off, to other things again, right? Like just people being people, like, oh, well, we're gonna have another disruption that's kind of self-inflicted. Is there some consideration for stringing as much together as possible at once?
Yeah, excellent question. We try to, if we can, minimize the disruptions in subsequent weeks. So, like if there is a disruption, is there a way that we can consolidate some things? As you identify, when you come back from Thanksgiving, if that's where the midpoint falls on 12/4, part of the question is, do we do this on 12/4? Well, is it better to wait a week? Do we do it a week early? Well, then that's before Thanksgiving. Is that really the right time? Because you haven't had enough time to really have that level of assessment to feel that those conferences may be as meaningful. So that's where we really look toward our education partners and really kind of work with our education association to say, okay, instructionally, where do you feel that these should fall to give that level of assessment? So we try to do that in consultation as well. And then if there is a PD need, as you'll see with that professional development day, we try to put that back there so that we have that week disrupted and we don't have the subsequent week disrupted with another day. So some of those are open items, and those are the ones that we continually work toward to try to say, okay, if 12/5 were not a professional development day, and we could, so, I mean, these are very real hypotheticals, and this is the balance. If you were to look at professional development not happening on 12/5, and you were able then to balance this out so that we could meet the 165 by having this school year end on June 5th, not come back on the 8th and 9th, but maybe move that 12/5 to the 8th of June for teachers who need to be here for that scheduled period of time. Might there be a way that it's less disruptive? Could we end on June 5th? Those are the dynamics and the nuance that are that next level of detail. And much like you identify, if there's a way that we can consolidate some of these or move some of these so that we can minimize the disruption, that's exactly what we're trying to do next. Does that help?
Yes, that's helpful. And then, also synchronizing the middle school, the elementary school, and the high school. What's the reason they have different days?
Different days for like conferences, those kinds of things, yeah. It's really based on the 4 terms of Hopkins High School. Their contained classes are within that term, so we try to do the conferencing within that structure. The middle level, really year-long and semester. So their conferences really are kind of built toward a model that gives them more time. They don't do it necessarily on the 4-term component like the high school is structured, because our high school scholars will have different classes every term. So there's that different conferencing structure. And those are all open conversations with buildings. We build them into the structure, and with our leaders, we're also having the conversation, much like you heard in virtual EDU. Are some of these structures really serving us well? Is it time to start to take a look at them differently? And when we plan for those, how much time are we giving to these? Where do we see the value in some of these? Those are open conversations right now as we continually look at not only the present structure, but could there be some different ways of looking at how we could operationalize the time?
Thank you. Chair Andreessen?
Yes, Treasurer Hartland.
Hello. I don't think it's super relevant this year, but the only way a district can begin school before Labor Day, which is generally not super popular, is by construction waiver, right? Special circumstances that MDE has to grant us.
Correct. Great point. It's the $400,000 project in one building threshold that is outlined in state statute that allows you to start before Labor Day, notifying MDE and having that set of conditions met. Really is designed then to preserve time at the end of the year to get even a longer set of construction period for any additional projects that might be forthcoming or need some additional time.
Sure. It's on the Legislative Action Coalition's radar because next year, so this is a discussion a ways out, but Labor Day is the latest it can possibly be to begin, not this coming school year, but the next. And so they're
Yeah.
already beginning the process of asking for possibly the state to recognize a waiver type of system. Is that something that?
Yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, what it drives is, as you're identifying here, that can push that well into the third week of June by the time you've met the number of day requirements that you have with instructional learning time. So those are the trade-offs. If there is an opportunity for waiver, and those have generally, like I said, only been held to that one level of construction that's allowed for that.
Okay, that's helpful information for the LAC as we word our ask
Mhm.
here. Thank you.
And some of us have started to look at 26, 27, and yep, you're exactly right. It's not a pretty calendar. So I'm happy to be in front of you with this one, rather not that other one that you'd be having lots of discussion about.
Thank you. I did also just have a very general question. As Director Westmoreland was talking about calendar equity, and I know that that's something that's important in Hopkins and in particular to our students and families. I just wanted to bring up something that one of our student board reps talked about at the board table tonight, which is the Hmong New Year, and wondering, has Hopkins explored if that's an appropriate time that we could be giving to families to observe something that's important to their culture? So just putting that question out there. I think I may have asked it before, but just that recognition that it is this weekend made me think of it in light of our calendar.
Yeah, it always is the, when you look at the available number of days, how do you build all of those in, given the amounts of demand that really are in place for conference as well as for professional development and instructional days, and where do those fit? Certainly, as you think about options and opportunities, those days can be considered. And generally, what that really looks toward is when does the school year begin and when does the school year end? If you're looking at additional periods of time that are identified for purposes, it really pushes that starting and end point to spaces that may start sooner and end later. And all of those are certainly considerations that could be in front of the board as you think more fully about what that could look like with the inclusion of additional. And certainly those conversations are conversations that you've had previously related to the inclusion of what we've added, as was mentioned earlier, with our Muslim and our Jewish holiday inclusion as well.
So was that, I guess I'm just wondering, have we spoken with our Hmong families, and is this a holiday that they would like to have recognized with our calendar, or is it something that
If
just
we're
doesn't
looking,
rise to that level?
If you're looking for us asking all of our communities, are there additional holidays that we should be considering? We have not posed that question to the greater community about holidays in general for what additional considerations should we be looking at within the calendar?
Okay, thank you.
Just real quick, thank you for sharing the calendar. Is there any appetite for, instead of having, Thanksgiving, so the 26th and the 28th, just having school on the 26th? I know no students want to hear that. and then potentially like
Oh, yeah, the days
reducing,
around it.
yeah, reducing winter break. So I don't know how many school districts in the metro have that entire week off from the 22nd to the 26th. I think, yeah, I agree. I think I agree with Director Thompson's point. Like, it's not going to go well in my household if in June I tell my kids you have to go back to school that Monday. There's going to be probably a mini World War III in my house if I communicate that, where if I said, yeah, you have to go to school on Monday the 22nd, I don't think they would really like bat an eye. So I'm not suggesting, I just don't know what the appetite would be for like, I think as a parent, for kids, they would love to have all these days off. For a parent, it's like, I would not enjoy having, like, I would be fine if my kids go to school tomorrow.
Sure.
So, and I would be fine with my kids going to school that Monday and Tuesday right before Christmas break.
Yeah, and it's always a bit of a challenge to kind of anticipate what that looks like. Sometimes when we have, done those kind of varied things, especially up against holidays, for many families, those are travel times. And as such, we may have the day, but the attendance might be quite surprising as to how many actually show. And so those are the other elements of consideration that we have over time, and looking at if we've designed something, what is the attendance on that? And especially what, does that look like in the overall impact of moving one day here might be a shift. But what do we gain from that move is also the conversation that we need to be thinking about. If that increases the number of instructional days, is that what we're hoping to accomplish? Because certainly those kinds of things can be built in. They just have to be at the level of what impact are we actually achieving with that. And if we think about what impact that has for staff, if staff can't travel on that day to get to their families, how do individuals possibly think about that as an impact also?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's no action that we need to take on this. Is that correct?
Correct.
Information purposes only. Any
Your
other-
input is so greatly appreciated, and it's always open. If there are other elements of consideration as you think through after the conversation, like I said, we're coming back to work on the particulars, and we'll have the next iteration in front of you with some more detail.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that being said, enjoy tomorrow as a holiday. And so that now takes us to our board member reports. I'd like to give an opportunity to all our board members to introduce themselves and give a report if you have one. I will start with you, Clerk Thompson.
Thanks. I'm Kai Thompson. I am the clerk on the board. I'm in my first year, so I started in January. I have 3 kids in the district from 4th grade to 9th grade, and I have no further board member report tonight.
Hello, my name is Brooke Roper. I am a first-year board member, serving in my first year with Koch and Kai, I'm sorry. And I have no real board member report, but it was cool that last week, Assistant Principal Burnett and our sons were able to go on a shopping spree with the Timberwolves at Target downtown. And so it was just really cool that 2 Hopkins students were a part of that. They each got $1,000 a piece to shop at Target. There was like all the Timberwolves players, Anthony Edwards, and all of them were there to just like support the students. The kids in the community, and it was a really life-changing experience for those 2. Me and Ms. Burnett have checked in, and we were just like ecstatic that they were chosen for that opportunity. So I would love to see more of that in the future for more Hopkins students. But That was amazing. And of course, yes, thank you to the transportation team for coming today. I would love to continue to talk about advocacy for electric school buses, especially going into the next year. And so, and I'm sorry, Clerk Thompson. Yes, but that's it.
Good evening. I'm Rachel Hartland and currently serving as the treasurer on this board. This is my third year. I live in Minnetonka inside the district bounds and have 3 students in this in the district, 1 at Meadowbrook, 1 at North Middle School, and 1 at the high school. I did see the Newsies, or I did see Newsies, perhaps, not the Newsies, and it was a wonderful show. All of the actors and actresses did an amazing job, and also extend my gratitude towards the people who worked so hard to put that on. The quality of our musicals have really gone up, and I enjoyed it. I did not have to watch it 6 or 7 times, though. The middle school FTC robotics team had a league match a week ago, and they went up against 20-some other Minnesota teams, and we actually have 3 teams now, partially thanks to a HEF grant that the middle school robotics team received last year. So this year they have 3 teams instead of 2. And those teams placed 2nd, 5th, and I think 10th out of 20-some. I attended the Parents of Gender Expansive Students parent affiliate group meeting. I went to a parent tea, a conversation with the principal at the high school with Principal Ballard. And I think that was all for my board report.
Good evening. I'm Rhoda Mary Puri-Reed, Superintendent. I've already provided my board report for this evening. Additionally, I have 2 children in our district, a 7th grader at West and a high schooler.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Shannon Andreessen. I am currently the chair of the board, and I'm in my 5th year on the Hopkins School Board. I have a junior at the high school whom I sometimes feel like I'm parenting, and Hopkins High School grad who is launched very successfully, so thank you, Hopkins. And I also work as a paraprofessional at Gatewood in the special education program there. I do have an update that comes to, I also serve on the District 287 board, our intermediate district, who they provide services to Hopkins students that are outside of our scope on both ends of the educational landscape. And this, every time we have a board meeting at District 287, we do a student spotlight, program spotlight, and then also have an above and beyond. And at this past board member, both of those were Hopkins people. So I wanted to share that with all of you. So the student is an amazing, wonderful student. She went to 287 2 years ago, and she has gets special education services for students who have low vision, but also gets additional supports for mobility. And she is at the West Learning Center, which is located just south here in Minnetonka. And so it was wonderful to see her and how well she's doing there. And then also the Above and Beyond Award goes to staff members who go above and beyond. And the person who is getting that recognition is an administrative support for the care and treatment team in the district. And she was wearing a Hopkins sweatshirt. So I said, "I love your sweatshirt." And she was like, "Thank you. I'm a Hopkins grad and I'm so proud." So our students are out there doing amazing things. Everyone had huge accolades about what she does for the district. And so I just wanted to share all that good news with everyone here.
Good evening, community members. My name is Jason Ross. I have 2 kids. Oh, I'll start by saying, even though I made the comment earlier, I obviously love my children. I'd just like to see them at school more often.
That's on the record.
We all get it. We all get it.
Kids, my kids, I'm joking if you're still awake. So I got 2 6th graders. They both go to North, obviously. And then I have a 3rd grader who's at Tanglin. And I don't have a board report.
Hello, this is Jiming Zhao. I use he, him pronouns. This is my first year on the board. I've got 2 kids going to Eisenhower and Xingxing, a 4th grader and a kindergartner, or sorry, 1st grader. And I think just wanted to say that I was at the kindergarten roundup, and it's very inspiring to see the kids coming in so small and ready, and seeing all the hope in the parents' eyes and everything. And so, it just kind of redoubles my commitment to making sure that they have the best outcomes possible. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jen Westmoreland, she, her. I am a proud graduate of Hopkins Schools. I am celebrating my 25th year as an educator. My first teaching job was actually as a long-term sub at Hopkins High School in French. And I had to meet with Dr. Lightfoot to get my paperwork together. And so I'm just so grateful for this community, and this is the reason that I'm an educator. And it's been an honor to serve on this board. I am in my 7th year, and I have a scholar at West Middle School who is really happy that we don't have school tomorrow. So thank you. Oh, you already did yours.
And I did also, I forgot to mention that we have coming up, I think it's next week, the MSBA Delegate Assembly. Is that right?
Yep.
Jade?
December 6th and 7th.
Yes, December 6th and 7th. Vice Chair Ross and I are your delegates. So you can, I believe, download the very thick delegate assembly resolutions. So if you want to take some time this weekend when you're processing turkey to look at that and see if there's any feedback on any of the resolutions contained within that you want to pass along to either one of us, we'll take that in consideration when we're voting. So I think that brings us to the end. I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned at 9:07 p.m. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us this evening.